Ross coming in.
I am going to add together the two.
Okay.
All right.
Oh. Okay, I'm going to call this meeting to order. It's unlikely we are going to have Councillor Coles with us because he had a medical appointment in Toronto. And Councillor Finson is on the telephone. The clerk is in the process of letting our two delegates in. We have a little bit of housekeeping, David and John, before we get to the delegations. I just want to point out today that we have an acting interim CAO in the form of Steve Stone because Michelle Fraser's mother passed away on the weekend and she's in Toronto. So Steve is here as the acting interim CAO and will be on the entire call. We have no addendum today, so I'd like to call for approval of the agenda as circulated. Any comments, discussion on the agenda? All in favor?
Did you say no addendum? Perfect.
Thought you'd like that.
Yeah,
So
I don't think away with
all in
addendum.
favor of the agenda as it was sent out, okay? Thank you.
Aye.
Thank you, Councillor Finson. And is there any disclosure of pecuniary interest and general nature thereof? Councillor
Yes.
Fuller?
Yes, I wish to declare I may have a conflict of interest, pecuniary interest in the following, related to the following matters. Council meeting agenda, item 5B, accounts B, payment to Wayne Hall Construction as the party is my employer.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
And I'm going to make a motion that the Council of the Corporation of the Township of Seguin does hereby adopt the minutes of the regular and closed session meetings of Council held July 20th, 2020, as circulated. Could I have a motion by Councillor Moffat?
I so move.
And seconded by Councillor Osborne? Oops, he's not there.
So moved.
Thank you. Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. That's carried. So I have a motion that the Council of the Corporation of the Township of Seguin does hereby approve the accounts in the amount of $1,136,591.24. Could I have a motion from Councillor Fellner?
So moved.
And seconded by Councillor Collins?
I'll second that, Mayor.
All in favor of accounts A? Thank you.
Aye.
Thank you, Councillor Vinson. And the next motion that the Council of the Corporation of the Township of Seguin does hereby approve the accounts in the amount of $2,100.04. Could I have a motion from Councillor Finson?
I so move.
And seconded from Councillor Moffat.
I'll second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Okay, but this comes after the delegate. Okay. I'd like to welcome, we have two delegations today. David Ellsworth, who's no stranger to council, and he's appearing as the chair of the Rose Point Recreational Trail Committee. And we have John Kane from Gilbane Lake concerning the discharging of firearms. So I'll ask David Ellsworth to speak first, and I remind the delegations that you have 10 minutes to present to council. So, David, welcome. I think we can hear you now, can we?
Thank you. I hope so. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
I understand that you have a memorandum on this matter comprised of at least 2 pages. One, a brief summary of the issue at hand, and a second one, a map taken from a report from 2012. If you can reference those, I'll address my remarks and to that memorandum and to the map.
Okay, we have it in our agenda package.
Thank you very kindly.
It's page 58 for those that need it to find it.
Thank you. The first point of reference is a task force. The task force in question was comprised of representatives of the town of Perry Sound, the Rotary Club of Perry Sound, and the Township. It also included someone from Active Transportation. The rationale behind the town's participation, I think, is particularly interesting. They were highly motivated by this project to find a link between the Rose Point Recreational Trail, and the Rotary Algonquin Fitness Trail in town. And part of their motivation was derived from a survey that they did of visitors to the Perry Sound area. And the number one question that that those visitors asked was there any recreational trails for biking, hiking, walking, whatever? It's a very attractive alternative to visitors to our community. What's not well known is that this kind of trail is not common outside of North America. Visitors from Europe are awed by the concept of being able to go out in the middle of nature on a publicly owned trail without fee and without any encumbrance, and to enjoy what's there. So among our visitors, it's extremely popular. The second comment that I would make is about the involvement of the Rotary Club of Perry Sound, and that signals a really unusual and remarkable relationship between the council and the Township of Seguin and the Rotary Club of Perry Sound. It's not uncommon for service clubs to have a relationship with a township or a municipality for a single issue, to raise some money for a playground, to do whatever. But an enduring relationship is quite uncommon. This one has extended, is held together by a memorandum of understanding, a written memorandum of understanding, and it's the third such memorandum of understanding. It's of 10 years duration, and has proven very beneficial to all parties, and should be maintained. That as a potential partner, the Rotary Club of Perry Sound comes willing to participate financially, and as a partner in getting improvements for the Rose Point Trail, which is the purpose of the memorandum. They are prepared to contribute to this project. In fact, the current memorandum of understanding identifies this project as the approved project for the 4 years of the term of the memorandum of understanding. And last but not least, I wanted to say also that that there really are an A-list partner, a better partner than the government even. The government sends you money, shows up for the photo op, and you never see them again. These people are from the community. They are supportive of the trail, and they are supportive of anything that you would do with the trail. The creation of a new trail represents sort of an ideal project for a council, particularly because it it shows that you're making an investment in the health and well-being of the residents. And it's a great project because almost all of the costs are front-loaded. They are capital costs associating with establishing the trail, and operating costs are minimal. That's all I have to say. If you go to the map, I will direct you to physically to what it is. The map, held in a landscape fashion, shows the Rose Point Trail as a dotted red line along the bottom, and the Rose Point Road as a yellow line extending from the lower bottom up the left-hand side to the town of Perry Sound. The area in question, the Colonization Road, is section 1 on that map.
Yeah.
If there are any questions, I'd be glad to respond to them. That's all I have to say.
Join the meeting.
Okay, I will call the people's questions. They put up a little blue hand to indicate they would like to ask a question. So Councillor Moffat, you have a question.
Thank you, Mayor. David, just one comment and a couple questions. I sit on the Perry Sound Area Active Transportation Committee, and we just had our meeting about an hour or so ago, and I referenced this from our council package as being an item of interest for the committee, and to see this this additional section move forward. So two questions. First question is, you mentioned about the draw of other people that come around. What kind of advertising does the Rose Point Trail Committee do, or what advertising is done on the trail for the trail to get the word out, other than word of mouth? Like, is there signage, or it's all word of mouth? So is there?
It's primarily word of mouth. Yes, there's no budget for advertising. There's no trail admission, and word of mouth has proven to be very effective. We can include brochures and things like that in areas, in places where tourists stay, Tapatu, any of the inns, whatever, but we've not been active since the committee's not been active in that venture.
So my second
question. Does have a brochure, yes, that includes all of our trails, and that's one of them in the township brochure.
Yeah, and I know obviously on our website, but it just in terms of maybe for those that are not from around here, can't necessarily find the trail and may have a bit of a challenge. The second question is and I think it kind of goes to your last comment, is the Rose Point Trail Committee working with any of the other municipalities on their expansion of their trails or anything like that to join? You know, obviously this is going to this section 1, and I guess it looks like it ends just before section 2 based on your map, David. Is there any sort of interaction or discussions, or, you know, with regards to Perry Sound or other parts to, you know, connect the trails throughout the area? Is that
let me comment on that. When the interim report was issued back in 2012, the most expensive part of the connection between the town, or between the Rose Point Trail and the Rotary Algonquin Fitness Trail, was a causeway on Rose Point Road, and getting across that safely. When the township redid Rose Point Road 2 or 3 years ago, they included a pedestrian lane alongside of that, and effectively this section will complete the trail link Route R that is identified in the top right-hand corner of the map. It's the one missing section, the missing link. And until the way across the causeway was established, the costs of the whole project were deemed to be too much. But once that happened, it became possible financially to proceed with this, and we have been waiting for about 5 years for another item to clear the agenda of the township. My understanding is that matter has been resolved. and there are no impediments to this project going forward.
So just in terms of working with other townships on trails, that hasn't happened, I guess, recently. It sounds like back when the memorandum and when you referenced Town of Parry Sound and Parry Sound Active Transportation in the township, it sounds like that's sort of the last time that any sort of discussions have occurred on trail combinations or stuff. Is that?
Yeah, active transportation, all of the bodies involved here, including the Rotary Club of Parry Sound, both the councils and active transportation, has a turnover of members. And so history is only exists to the extent that there are corporate members or corporate memory present in one of the seats, and so this will ensure one of the two routes between the two. The next logical one, if you look on the map, is a far more scenic route we've identified as Route E, and it runs down along the waterfront behind the salt docks and through to the end of the Rotary Algonquin Fitness Trail, which ends at Champagne Street. So that is actually on the map that you have in front of you.
Thank you, David.
Councillor Osborne.
Good afternoon, David. Rod Osborne here. I'm a little confused here. Are the portion of the trail we're under consideration, I take it, is Section 3?
Section 1.
Sorry?
Section 1. It runs from if you have the map in a landscape section, the Rose Point Trail is the red dotted line along the bottom. Rose Point Road is the yellow greenish line that extends from the swing bridge up to Emily Street, and the section we're talking about is low center and identified as section.
So that goes from the Rose Point Trail to
Rose Point Road.
Butts up to Section 2, which is on Rose Point Road.
Yes.
Emily Street, right.
Yes.
So whatever happened to Section 3? The short orange piece, little loop there.
We haven't done it. One of the reasons that the interim report was confidential is a portion of that route was tied up in probate, and that subsequently cleared. But the priority of the committee, the priority of the Rotary Club of Parry Sound was this section, and if that clears and is built, there is no reason that that the other part can't be put on the front burner. My understanding is that the orange piece runs through the marina that is owned by the Archipelago, and they some time ago had indicated a willingness to allow that trail to go through there. It runs down Roncaster Lane. There is a road where Roncaster Lane extends. There's a semblance of a road that runs down to the town limits. So the cost to the township of moving in that route would not be significant.
All right, then there's another section which is route Section 4, which is red. That has not been built yet, correct?
That's correct, because part of that was in probate, the first portion of it behind the salt dock, and that portion of it is entirely within the town.
All right, so this $60,000 you referred to here, project estimate 2012, what does that include, David, then?
That was a back of the envelope estimate that was required for the report.
Section 1?
Yeah, Section 1 was, and obviously it's 8 years dated now, and is a logical first step in in putting this thing on the front burner, find out what it's going to cost. The Rotary Club of Perry Sound has monies on deposit with the township that they could devote to this project and assist.
So currently, the Rose Point Trail does intersect with Rose Point on the lower side of the map, correct?
Absolutely, yes.
So there is a connection already. This is just another route, shortcutting that longer route near the swing bridge.
Yeah, it serves that function and makes it a more direct route. It also serves as a complete circuit for anybody that wants to enter the trail from the Rose Point end, and it allows a loop so that you don't have to retrace your steps. That would be very popular among the people.
Okay, so I vaguely remember back 6 years ago, this coming up about the section 3, the discussion, and there was some encumbrance there. Now, you mentioned that Seguin had been reluctant to move forward until another matter was concluded. That issue has been resolved. Can you enlighten me as to what that matter was?
It was the business of council, but it was the washed out bridge on the south side of the trail that accessed those properties that are now landlocked.
Boyne River?
Yes.
Yeah. So you also mentioned the project cost was $60,012. This amount is contained in the township's approved budget. Is it contained in our existing
It is
2020 budget?
It's in your 2020 budget for this year approved.
All right. I just don't recall any discussion about that back at budget.
It's been brought forward several times while the other matter was resolved, held in abeyance, as if you were.
Okay. So how would this funding go then? You mentioned the Rotary Club has some funds on on hand. What would be expected if the figure was still, say, 60,000, which it likely isn't? What percentage of that figure would see?
I don't know.
Councillor Osborne, I'm just going to interject here because the resolution that we have before is going to talk about updating the estimate and how the payments would be made. So it's a little premature to talk about that, so we get the staff direction on the numbers.
Good. I'm done. Thank you, David, for the info.
Councillor Fellner.
I find I have no questions. David, I had some, but I think I got a better understanding now. So the intent is that you're not going to do it. You're not looking to expend funds on section 4, just really on section 1.
Section 4 is in the town and would be the town's responsibility.
Yeah, that was my point. Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Thanks.
Oh, I had one more. I'd forgotten about, Mayor.
Okay,
David,
last question on this.
How does the town, or when does the town figure on getting from Emily Street over to the Algonquin Trail? Any timing on that, or any emphasis on it?
There, effectively, it's a block long. The connection is down Champagne Street, and so it is a road, a gravel road, and fairly wide, and is easily navigable now.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, I'd like to read the resolution that is before us that builds on David's report and the documents in our agenda package. The resolution reads that the Council of the Corporation of the Township of Seguin does hereby direct staff to commence the process to stop up and close the portion of the former Carrington Colonization Road between Rose Point Road and the Rose Point Recreational Trail, and designate the portion of the road allowance for trail purposes. And that Council does hereby direct staff to update the cost estimate to upgrade the above noted portion of former Carrington Colonization Road allowance for trail purposes. Could I have a motion from Councillor Fellner?
Yeah, so moved.
Thank you. Seconded by Councillor Finson.
I second that.
Thank you. All in favor of proceeding to the next step?
Aye.
Thank you. Counselor Osborne, okay, and that's carried. David, I do want to take this opportunity to thank you, not just for today's presentation, but for everything you and all of your volunteers do. I agree with you that Rose Point Trail is a gem and definitely a draw to our community. I personally have handed out lots of the brochures on trails to people that are here in an unusual time of year because of COVID, and most of them had no idea and are enjoying the trails. So congratulations on the partnership with Rotary and everything you and your volunteers do.
Thanks for including me on your agenda today.
Well, thank you for all you do. So I will now call on John Kane from Gilbane Lake. I think his documentation is extremely comprehensive, and Mr. Kane and I have spoken many times about this. So, Mr. Kane, would you like to go ahead with your delegation? Oh, I think you might still be on mute. You're still on mute?
You're muted, John. Bottom left corner. Bottom left, John.
Going to do something different. I think you might still be on mute.
Am I on?
Okay.
Am I there?
Yeah,
Oh, thank you.
Now hear you. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Good afternoon, Madam Mayor and members of Seguin Township Council. My name is John Kane of 12 Goldfinch Drive on Gilbane Lake, and I appreciate the opportunity to address Council today on a matter that I believe to be rather serious and warranting urgent action on the part of the municipality. This has to do with the discharge of firearms which began in the fall of 2019 at 10 Goldfinch Drive. As a consequence, the havoc that is being playing out because of my new neighbor's sense of entitlement to shoot guns on their property. Within steps of my cottage, other neighboring cottage properties, and the hydro corridor at the rear. I'd like to start off by saying that I've been a seasonal resident of Seguin Township for a little more than 8 years, having invested in a modest cottage on Gilbane Lake. When I bought the property, and I quote, when I bought the property, in the year of 2012, the realtor who listed the cottage advertised it as, and I quote, peace and tranquility on Gilbane Lake. Except for the very reasons that I'm here today, the agent's claim couldn't have been farther from the truth. I love my cottage, and up until this time, I have poured a tremendous amount of time and energy into maintaining its state of good repair and making it my escape on weekends and vacation time. Gilbane Lake is among the more modest-sized lakes in Seguin and enjoys the long-standing reputation of being a quiet, family-oriented lake for cottage residents, their families, children, and their guests to enjoy. The lake is like a little quiet cul-de-sac. It has an intimate feeling with modest-sized cottage properties ranging from 1 to 1.5 acres in area. Frontages range from about 150 to 168 feet, and cottage dwellings are at an average of 100 to 150 feet apart, depending on their location and placement on their lots. Madam Chair, with my intro in the background, I'd like to turn your attention to a very quick review of the events that have been unfolded in the recent past, compelling and leading me to appear before Council today. When number 10 Goldfinch changed hands in the fall of 2019, the new owners brought with them a troubling and irresponsible attitude towards the discharge of firearms on their property, along with the disruptive noise that accompanies gun shooting. During a weekend stay at our cottage last October, and much to our dismay, my partner and I heard the loud and repeated firing of guns, which seemed as in steps within our cottage property at the rear. This year, in June, the guns began to fire off again over the course of several days, this time with pellet guns and the sporadic use of heavier firearms. On the afternoon of June 16th, while relaxing on our dock, and then sitting on the upper deck of our cottage, we could hear the distinctive popping sound of pellet guns ensuing a number of directions from the back of my neighbor's property, near the side of our property, and towards the lake frontage, bouncing off metal objects and other surfaces. On the evening of that same day in June, again, we witnessed the intermittent use of heavier firearms, clearly coming from the back of our neighbor's cottage. The shooting resonated loudly across the entire lake, and at least 3 cottage families on the opposite side witnessed this and have expressed their shock and dismay. The evidence is there at the back of my neighbor's cottage, a makeshift shooting practice with beer and pop cans affixed to trees as the targets, allowing missed targets and stray bullets to travel through my property, the neighboring property on the opposite side, and the hydro corridor that cuts through the cottage properties at the rear. I would also like to mention that just a couple of weeks ago, while working on my side yard, I came across a shiny round pellet, clearly belonging to a pellet gun, which makes this situation much more worrisome. As council can appreciate, everything I've just described above is contrary to why the reasons why cottagers have come to Seguin in the first place, which is to relax and enjoy the peacefulness and tranquility of the cottage setting. This is not the city of Toronto where gun shooting is rampant and commonplace. This is Gilbane Lake. This is Seguin. I have made many attempts to confront, reason, and articulate my concerns to the owner of 10 Goldfinch Drive, but all efforts to communicate have been futile, falling on deaf ears. Apparent is the owner's sense of entitlement to shoot firearms and pellet guns on their property with an arrogance and blatant disregard for human safety that defies all common sense and logic. The situation is troubling and poses a serious threat to the safety of myself, my partner, other neighbors, and their children, including family pets. I have reached out to the OPP, bylaw officers, other authorities and agencies, often with repeated calls and inquiries to seek answers or request an investigation. But instead,
join the meeting.
But instead, this has just amounted to nothing more than a constant runaround, each agency referring me to the next and circling right back to the first. No agency is willing to take accountability or responsibility. As you can appreciate, this leaves me to feel very vulnerable, helpless, and without any helpful recourse. Madam Mayor, in contacting you a few weeks back, I expressed my willingness to work with council and collaborate with Seguin Township in finding solutions to address this troubling situation. Perhaps a good place we can start is to look at what other jurisdictions have done to address similar matters within their own backyard, if I may use that term. Neighboring municipalities such as the Township of Lake of Bays, the Township of Georgian Bay, the Township of Muskoka Lakes, and the Township of Algonquin Highlands have undertaken bold steps to address very similar situations and experiences. For council's reference, I have included links to their bylaws and attachments, also including Seguin's bylaw for comparison purposes. While each of these bylaws are tailored to address particular circumstances with respect to the discharge of firearms, they all assert to one common thing, that is to ensure the safety of all its citizens and to protect people from harm's way. Bylaws from these municipalities have explicit prohibitions that speak to the discharge of firearms in proximity to dwellings, related to property size and distance, specific regulations to address shooting in settlement and rural areas and other land uses, and even the outright prohibition of target shooting practices in certain areas. Seasonal residents on Gilbane Lake now want Seguin Township to enact similar protective measures in ensuring our safety, well-being, and addressing the appropriateness of shooting guns in proximity to where we dwell as cottagers. We would want Seguin Township to put a stop to the discharge of firearms impacting cottage properties on Gilbane Lake, and we would want council to initiate a review of its policies and bylaw regulations, bringing them in line with regulations of other neighboring municipalities who've confronted similar issues. Madam Chair and council members, in light of my request, I am also bringing this matter before you today with vigorous support and endorsement of my cottage neighbors and other property owners on Gilbane Lake. We want to work with you in finding a solution, but the seriousness of this matter warrants urgent attention in ensuring the safety of the lake and putting forward a regulatory regime with teeth. That also recognizes the values as we cottagers on Gilbane Lake uphold in being good neighbors, including the reasons why we come to Seguin Township. I thank you again for the opportunity here today and look forward to your deliberations and any actions to be taken on this matter. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Kane. I do want to add a little bit. I did reach out to the acting Sergeant Jeremy McDonald at the OPP, and with your, I haven't done anything yet, but I would like your permission to send. Actually, he can see it now on the website. Your presentation. He indicated that he was prepared to go to the next step with the OPP to arrange for some type of community mediation. He I didn't talk to him until late last week, so he said there was absolutely no way it would happen before
Mhm.
May, August 4th. But I believe that you will have some action from OPP to at least them sitting down and talking to your offending neighbor. We have a question from Councillor Osborne for you.
Yep. Yes.
Good afternoon, John.
Good afternoon.
So, two things. You mentioned air rifles, pellet rifles,
Yes.
and you said other types of firearms. Can you
Yes, sir.
specify
Well,
what other rifles or handguns?
yeah, so
caliber?
I will explain. So this neighbor, he purchased the property from his mother.
Yes.
His father, I never met the gentleman. He was there, he's passed away. He was there years ago. So the son, he's always referred to that his dad always used to shoot there. And that very well may be. I did know up until the fall of last year, the other son used to come up maybe 2 or 3 times in the summer, and they were wonderful. I never had a problem. But he did take me in the cottage, and there was, from what I recall, there must have been, I think, 4 to 5 lockers, and there were 22 shotguns in there. They were 22s, and that's what was discharged. Well, it was discharged one summer from the balcony. His cousins discharged them. He spoke to me about it, and he apologized, and I never had a problem after that. When the son purchased the property last year, that's what they were shooting there. So I knew there was 22s. So this year, from what I was aware, the 22s were in there. I've heard them. And then there's been air guns and pellet guns. The shooting practice in the back, they're shooting if you're going to shoot, if you miss your target, you are responsible for what lies behind it. And if it's traveling into the neighbor's property or my property, or the hydro line, which is a right of way, because hydro workers do use that. And I've seen many children, and I've seen people walk that line. That's what I have an issue with. So,
Thank you.
and I've never.
Okay, carry on.
And I've when I did call the OPP, in regards, I knew they did come to the dock, but they never did come out because they told me they needed the Marine unit to come out because we're boat access. So nobody actually came out to inspect the guns if they're registered, because they were registered in the father's name. So, and I've tried to reason with them. The Tuesday evening of the one evening when I went out and I told them I was going to contact the OPP, I got sworn at and I got verbally threatened. So all attempts, I'm actually scared of them, and I don't want to engage in any conversation with them because it's just going to escalate, and I think I'm just best to avoid that situation.
Okay, getting back to the rifles, there are 20 air guns and 22 rifles.
I know there's 22s.
Yeah,
The
22
other,
correction, 22s is not a shotgun. It's a low caliber rifle. So
Okay.
the OPP came out. Had they inspected his gallery or his shooting range?
no, never, sir, never.
No.
The
Did you ask
thing,
them to do that, or?
I'm not 100% sure. I assumed that they were going to come out and investigate the shooting target practice, because in relation to the size of the property, the width of the property, the bullet's going to go through the property. I mean, if their property is only 150 feet or 168 feet in width, and they're shooting, and the can is 7 to 8 feet away from my property line, it's shooting towards the back of my property. And the evening when they were shooting off the deck, they were shooting right along my property line. And I came up my trail with my dogs, and they were shooting from the balcony, and I feared coming up. And I could hear them hitting objects down towards the lake. They have a makeshift, it's an old, looks like an old barbecue, and I could hear it hitting the metal, and they have 2 little outhouses. And the front of our property on this side of the lake is all granite. It's all granite outcroppings.
Yep.
So
Okay.
bullets can ricochet.
Okay, thank you. And I'd like to bring, if we could, Don Hood into this conversation, maybe to give his expertise
Mhm.
on our existing bylaws, Don? Thanks.
Okay, and I can tell you, before you speak, John, the OPP did not come out because, as Mr. Kane has indicated, they need to get the marine unit in order to get to the property. So that is something that Inspector McDonald said, okay, if it's this serious, we'll have to get there somehow. So that was your initial response, correct, John, from them? That
Yes,
they couldn't
yes,
get there from
yes.
the marine. So, Dawn, do you want to talk a little bit about what you can? This is head of bylaw, our fire chief.
Yeah, I believe, John, you and I spoke at least on one occasion.
Yes,
You were telling me the situation you were facing, and certainly the details as you've laid them out are familiar. I remember that conversation. I probably directed you to either the MNR or the OPP or both.
yes, yes.
And
And I do, sorry, excuse me if I may say, I did talk to the MNR, and they were very supportive, but they did mention they would come out. And then the last conversation I had, he said they couldn't come out only in the hunting season. So,
okay.
and then in regards to a shooting range on a property, I don't know the actual laws, but if you are shooting on a habitual on a daily basis on a property, it has to be encased and it has to have a backdrop. And there's certain regulations in regards to how far from the neighboring dwelling, in regards to a dwelling, how far you have to be. 100 feet, I don't know if it meets that requirement, or 10 feet from a property line. But they're also shooting through the hydro line corridor, which is not Crown land. It goes through all, I mean, we all have property in the back and beyond it. And that is a right of way from what I understand.
Yeah, so I think I probably mentioned to you, Seguin has two settlement areas, which
Mhm.
does restrict the discharge of firearms. One is Rosso, one is Oroville.
Yes.
And those are the two areas that are exempt from discharging of firearms. They are not
Mhm.
allowed to be discharged. Also in our parks bylaws, as you indicated in your report, it addresses air guns, et cetera, cannot be discharged in our parks. Listening to what you've indicated, just a question, I could be wrong on this, I just looked it up on the map, but I believe on the far side of Gilbane, opposite you, is a significant area of Crown land.
Yes.
Which I think would be, obviously, you've attempted to open the door with MNR and the OPP, and maybe next steps would be is for us as bylaw to engage them, and at least there's a connection. We work with them on a regular basis. They know who we are, and say, here's a situation, let's go take a look, let's get some input from them and see what can be done from their perspective. Certainly the safety issue, I think, is key, where the result is you can have a shooting range if it's done correctly, then it needs to be deemed safe. And certainly those two agencies should be able to give you that feedback and enforce to that neighbor.
So my concern, if you do have a shooting range, I know in other neighboring townships, I've looked at some laws. I don't know about. I'm not 100% with this municipality, but provincial laws. There are laws, for example, saying 500 meters from a dwelling. But if you have a shooting range, if you shoot on a habitual or daily basis, then it has to be approved by the provincial government, and it has to be insured. When I talked about this with all the neighbors on this lake, they all just assumed that guns could not be shot on the property. But when I actually when I've talked to the bylaw office up here, they basically said there's nothing in the laws, so they're free to shoot. And that just sort of shocks me, because the pellets, if they miss the target in the back, I mean, you can't see my property here now, but I have granite outcroppings all through the back, and a bullet could ricochet off there. And I found a pellet on my property. The whole front of their property is rock and trees. I'm not an expert on guns, but if they're high-powered pellet guns, I know some of them shoot 300 yards. Some of them may shoot 500 yards. They would shoot through my property or the neighbor's property. So they're still projectiles. The evening of the Tuesday, I believe they discharged at night the 22, and I believe they just did it in a manner to harass me. And
those are the things, John, where we can assist you with the authorities.
Yeah.
Right, because there are regulations depending on the pellet gun. There's so many feet per second, and if you're under that, anyone can buy a pellet gun. And
I understand. Yes.
Right. So I think to me, the next steps would be.
We have one other question from another councillor, but what I'd like to suggest is that we take the other questions from Councillor Moffat, and that we refer the whole issue back to staff, which would be Dawn, and our acting CAO is Stephen Stone with his agreement, and also link them up with the OPP that will by now have read your full report and offered to do some potential mediation. Because I think what we need the exact facts. You've presented many, but I think there's a little more research that needs to be done. And Dawn, with your agreement, I kind of hand it off to you after the questions are finished to do some more, and I'll send you a copy of the email that I got back from Jeremy McDonald at the OPP as well as an introduction to what's next. Are you comfortable with that?
I am.
Okay. Councillor Moffat, you have a question.
Well, actually, I have two questions for Dawn.
John. Thank you.
No, Dawn Hood, but maybe John, do you recall when you reached out to Dawn? Do you?
I do. I don't know exactly. I've spoken to so many people.
Approximate timeline, like was it in the last month? Was it because you mentioned this started in the fall of 2019? I did call some bylaw officers in the fall, and I did call the OPP to ask questions. And then when I came up here in the spring, I did call and I spoke to bylaw officers around the May long weekend period, because that's when they first came up. So yes, I can't remember. I spoke to, yeah. Yep. Yeah, I know. Dawn, how many kind of complaints do we get for discharging of firearms on an annual basis?
To be honest, this is the first one.
Okay.
That we have questions about Crown land a lot, where can I go and set up a target range in Crown land? And that then is obviously, we have no jurisdiction over Crown land. So the answer is you need to check with the M&R, the government.
May I ask a question if somebody knows here? And I don't know if you could answer this. In regards to the hydro line, because it's not on Crown land and it runs through the back of our properties, the neighbors on the side of me and the three neighbors on the other side of me, is that considered a right of way? Because that's a right of way for the hydro line workers, so they need to access that right of way. So from my understanding,
John, but I understand. My understanding is that hydro lines are posted, no trespassing.
Okay.
And so if somebody is trespassing on that property, they're taking that risk, and they could be charged with trespassing at the same time.
Okay. No, but for your hydro one line workers that access that property, they obviously have the right, but that is a right of way for them. So would you legally be able to shoot through that property?
John, I think we may not be able to answer that tonight, but that's something that staff can look into.
Mayor,
Moffat, you have another question?
Sorry, just in some cases, John, the municipality owns the land underneath the hydro towers, and there's an easement against.
Yeah, that's right.
So I know in my case it is, but again, I agree with the mayor that we need to get the facts to determine whether it's municipal land or hydro land or crown land or whose land it is. So
I'm
Thank you.
I'm gonna thank you, John, for bringing this to our attention. You and I have
Thank you.
chatted many times. We will not let it drop. Apparently, Councillor Osborne has his hand up. Last comment on this issue, please. You're on mute, Councillor Osborne. Councillor Osborne, you're on mute.
Mayor, thank you for your patience.
Thank you.
Okay.
I was going to suggest that, Don, your words spoken about you contacting the OPP, having a visit, investigating the situation, and giving us the guidelines from the OPP is the best way to go on this. That's a good starting point, and you're obviously prepared to do that, Don.
I am, yes.
Thank you very much. I think that's end of story for now. We'll leave it in your hands to get back to us. Thanks.
Thank you.
John, thank you very much for your presentation and your patience. Safety is our #1 priority, and also the fact that we're supposed to be the natural place to be. So I will ask staff to get in touch with you. I'll forward the email I've got from Jeremy to you, Don, and back to you, John Kane, and see if we can get the facts and the resolution. But I appreciate your time and the research you've done and collecting the signatures from other people on the lake.
Thank you so much. Thank you for your time.
Okay, well, thank you. Staff will be back to you. Thank you. Okay, we are moving into staff reports. We have a motion that the Council of the Corporation of the Township of Seguin does hereby receive the staff reports as presented on the agenda for August 4th, 2020 meeting of Council. Could I have a motion from Councillor Collins?
I so move.
Thank you, and seconded by Councillor Osborne.
Second.
Thank you. All in favor of receiving staff report? Aye. Thank you,
We still have our guest on there, Mayor.
Sorry.
On now.
Okay, yeah, that takes a minute, the technician. Okay, so we're gonna, I think all of the staff reports are extremely self-explanatory. As you probably know, the financial update and the draft budget and strategic planning is something that is presented to us by Michelle. She's not here to answer questions today, but I think they are very self-explanatory. There's really no surprises in the financial report, and it comes to us every 2 months. Are there any big issues on that, or shall we defer to when Michelle can be here to answer questions? I think.
I prefer to defer. Oh,
Okay.
sorry. No hand. I prefer to defer it. Michelle's the
Okay.
one that should speak to this.
We can ask her to come back with it next month or wait for the second month. It'll be up to her. The draft budget and strategic planning schedule, you got one of those last year. The next steps on that are really put all those dates in your calendar. September comes quickly. So I think it's, okay, so we have a resolution here that the Council of the Corporation of the Township of Seguin does hereby adopt the 2021 Budget and Strategic Planning Schedule as attached as Schedule A, and that's what's in your package on page 89.
Gail?
Join
the meeting.
Gail, are you there or not? Just take a break again. Okay. Could I have a motion from Councillor Moffat?
I so move.
Thank you. And seconded by Councillor Felder.
Yeah, I'll second that.
All in favor of adopting the schedule?
Aye.
Thank you, Gail.
So just to make sure I understand, So the financial update, we'll just wait for the next one, next
Yeah,
month?
I think the financial, I think we'll defer to the next one.
Well, we'll just wait for the
Yeah,
next one.
then that way for, it's every 2 months. isn't it?
Yeah,
Yeah,
every month.
every month, so we'll have one at the next meeting anyways. We have a report on Bill 197 and the electronic participation in meetings, and I'm gonna ask our clerk, Craig, to talk about this.
The report.
Pretty self-explanatory.
Maybe I'll get you to read the motion first. and
Oh,
then
read the
we'll go
motion,
from there.
okay. The motion is that the Council of the Corporation of the Township of Seguin does hereby direct staff to prepare the necessary amendments to the Township of Seguin procedural bylaw, which is bylaw number 2020-033, to continue to permit electronic participation in meetings, including that a member of council who is participating electronically in a meeting may be counted in determining whether or not a quorum of members is present at any point in time, and a member of council can participate electronically, including voting in a meeting that is open or closed to the public, and that the amendments to permit electronic participation in meetings shall be effective from the date of passage of the bylaw, which could be today, until October 31st, 2020. And further, that the matter of electronic participation in meetings be reviewed again at the October 19th, 2020 meeting of council to determine whether or not to continue with electronic participation in meetings beyond October 31st, 2020. Could I have a motion from Councillor Finson?
I so move.
Thanks, Gail. And seconded by Councillor Moffat.
I'll second that.
Thank you. Now, discussion, are there any questions? But I would ask Craig to tell you why he picked some of the dates and...
So, excuse me, as council's aware, we had some discussion previously about what would take place if the provincial emergency was called off or ceased, and it was. And council at that point spoke about declaring an emergency to continue our electronic meetings. The province has also implemented legislation which now allows councils to do that, and that's mentioned in the report. So what we're suggesting is we amend our procedural bylaw to continue with the electronic meetings as council currently is doing until the end of October. We chose the end of October. It gives time for school to start and to see how things are going to go and whether or not there's a second wave and more closures. So that's really what the recommendation is. We would have to come back the second meeting in October for review with council to see if you wanted to terminate that or continue that.
I see a question from Councillor Fellner.
Okay, so now with the change, so just, Craig, with the change in this legislation, then it's not necessary to have the state of emergency declared, is that correct?
Yeah.
That's correct.
Okay, so is this sort of designed by the province to be a long-standing thing? Is this sort of like, is this the way it's, I mean, what's their intent by changing the legislation?
The province has left it up to councils to decide that. So they've said you can put this in place temporarily, or you can put it in place ongoing.
Right. Okay.
Councillor Moffat.
Just want to follow up on the October 31st date. I know that we had talked about not meeting in person, for the summer, but it doesn't sound like, based on the current status of things, that we're going to be meeting in person maybe for all the balance of 2020. And I was wondering if is it easier just to move it to December 31st, 2020, as opposed to October 31st? And really the question is to Craig, and I know I can't see him, but I'm sure he's pleased with my question.
Actually, the reason that staff picked the October 31st was twofold. One is, as I say, to theoretically allow the schools to start in September and see what the outcome is of that. And the other one is some area municipalities, Town of Parry Sound, have also chosen October 31st. That's really the reasoning behind it. That date is really up to council. It could be, as you say, different.
I don't know, I guess
Go ahead.
my preference or feeling would be is to leave us the flexibility and go to the end of the year, but I'm not gonna die on the hill, so.
We can extend it in the middle of October if we've learned something. The other piece of this whole puzzle is I believe that our ratepayers have gotten used to being able to observe us. And I believe that they were going to want to continue that even if we aren't doing Zoom meetings. And going to October 31st also gives staff an opportunity to investigate the costs and the technology involved in having them watch. Unless we're on Zoom, and they won't get a YouTube unless we retrofit the council chambers. So that's the other piece of the whole puzzle that gives staff an opportunity to do that and work it into potentially the 2021 budget. If we come to October 19th and we still feel the need, we can extend it again. But I think this gives us some sort of a target for both staff and us to work towards. Councillor Osborne, you have your hand up.
Thank you, Mayor. Yes, three things. The fact that Town of Parry Sound is gone by the end of October, I think we should be in simpatico with them. Also, the staff recommendation that because we've gone to stage 3 opening and the province is waiting to see the effects of that, plus schools opening, which could be disastrous, that's also another reasoning behind that. And in terms of the public liking our Zoom meetings, investing in the technology to publicize our meetings in the future, even in 21, is a likely prospect as far as I'm concerned. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Moffat, you still have your hand up? Do you have another question? No? Okay. So we have a motion on the floor to accept the recommendation of staff and continue electronic participation in meetings up to October 31st. All in favor?
Yep.
You need a mover and seconder? No?
We've got a motion and a second.
Oh, in favor.
So all in favor? Okay.
Aye.
Let's
Thank
stay
you,
awake,
Gail.
Freddie.
Okay, it's carried. Now we're moving into Public Works. And I will read the motion that bylaw number 2020-078, being a bylaw to enter into an intersection identification lighting agreement between the Corporation of the Township of Seguin and Her Majesty the Queen in right of the Province of Ontario as represented by the Minister of Transportation for the Province of Ontario to install intersection identification lighting at the intersection of Highway 141 and Humphrey Drive is deemed to have been read a first, second, and third time and passed by council. Could I have a motion from Councillor Fellner?
Yes, so moved.
And seconded by Councillor Osborne.
Second?
Okay, and I will ask Peter, who I believe is on, to speak to this.
Let's hold on.
I'm here.
Hi,
Okay,
Pete.
thank you. Do you have anything to tell us about on this?
Not really. We're going to relocate a pole that was not in the right spot in the first place. And because it's on the highway corridor, it's a requirement that we get an encroachment permit, which is really what this agreement is all about. And Tom did some work on the MTO, and from what I understand, they have waived the $300 fee. So we're really just moving the pole 6 to 10 feet to accommodate the work going on next door. So it's not a big deal.
Okay. Are there any other questions of Director Coppich? Okay, can I call a vote? All in favor of this motion? Thank you, Gail. You in favor?
Aye, yes.
Thank you. Carried. And for those of you that haven't been by the township office, work is definitely happening next door. Okay, I have a motion. Should we go to public meetings?
Well, I believe there's a phone number here of someone in the waiting room, and I think it's probably for the item H.
Okay, but we also have public,
30.
So, I think there was somebody coming.
yes, could I just ask the person on the
I'll
telephone?
have to let them in, so.
Okay, sorry, okay. Might jump around a little because we're at 5:30 for public meeting.
Also, staff recommendation.
So, there should be someone in the phone number.
Hello?
Yeah, hello. Could I ask if the person on the telephone happens to be from Brackenridge Landscaping?
No, I'm from Crofters Food Limited right now,
Okay, you're from
waiting for
Crofters.
the Mike White decision.
Oh, gotta stay in the waiting room.
So all we have, well, was that Mr. Radka? Because he's in the waiting room.
Could you identify your name, please?
My name is Gerhard Latka.
It's Gerhard, okay. So
Crofters.
he's Gerhard for
Yeah.
Crofters.
Also in the waiting room still under Gerhard Latka. You have a couple of people attending, Mr. Latka?
It could be that the office of John Jackson is attending also.
There's
Okay.
John.
So,
We'll move into the public meeting. And then we'll come back to, staff reports.
So
Okay.
you're gonna squeeze in the public meeting quickly and then go back to your
That's what we're
private?
gonna- That's what you're gonna do for you, Mr. Ladka and John. We're gonna move to your item right now. So
Thank you.
I have a motion that the council of the corporation of the Township of Seguin does hereby adjourn the regular meeting to hold a public meeting for the following matters. Zoning bylaw amendment application R 2020-0008-F for White or Crofters. Consent application number B 2020-0014-F and B 2020-0015-F for Coulter. Could I have a motion from Councillor Collins?
Yes, I so move.
Thank you. And Councillor Moffett, could you second it?
I'll second that.
All in favor of moving into a public meeting? Thank you.
Aye.
Okay, so this is my bit of a diatribe here, but bear with me. Council will now hold public meetings for proposed consent and zoning bylaw amendment applications. In accordance with the Planning Act, Council will consider all matters placed before it prior to granting a consent or passing a zoning bylaw. If a person or public body who files an appeal of a decision of the Council of the Corporation of the Township of Seguin in respect of a proposed consent does not make written submissions to the Council before it provides or refuses to provide a provisional consent, the Local Planning Appeal Tribunal may dismiss the appeal. Anyone wishing to receive notice of the passing of a zoning bylaw amendment not owning land within 120 meters of the area to which it applies and who has not submitted such a request in writing should provide your full name and address to the clerk. If a person or public body does not make oral submissions at a public meeting or make written submissions to the Council of the Corporation of the Township of Seguin, the person or public body is not entitled to appeal the decision of the Council to the Local Planning Appeal Tribunal, and the person or public body may not be added as a party to the hearing of an appeal before the Local Planning Appeal Tribunal unless, in the opinion of the Tribunal, there are reasonable grounds to do so. The purpose of zoning bylaw amendment application number R 2020-0008-F, White, is to rezone the subject lands from existing rural residential zone to the Village Industrial Exception 6, M1-6 zone, to allow for a warehouse expansion. The M-6 zone allows for a warehouse as an additional permitted use. The lands to be rezoned will also merge with the balance of the Crofters property at 470 Osler Park Drive. I now ask the clerk to state the method by which the notice of the meeting was provided and the dates on which that notice was provided.
notice of the public meeting was provided by posting the property and by regular mail on July 15th, 2020. Notice was therefore considered to be provided in accordance with the requirements of the Planning Act.
Has anyone registered to speak in favor of or in opposition to this application?
John Jackson, agent for the applicant, has registered to speak to this application.
Okay, John, do you have something to add to us now?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I've checked with the staff report. All looks supportive. No department head objections. So we're pleased to see that. We're just hoping for council's support as well in adopting the bylaw. Thank you.
We have a question for you from Councillor Moffat.
John, how close is the building going to be from the EP zone?
This particular EP zone actually has had a lot of modifications, so it's not really coming into play at all, so it will not be close to it at all.
Okay, it's hard to tell just on the diagram in our council package, so.
Yeah,
Okay.
maybe
it looks bigger than what it is.
Oh,
I
yeah,
guess.
it's almost not even existent, Councillor.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Osborne.
Thank you, Mayor. John, obviously the applicant has purchased a piece of property and is going to remove a house, existing home.
Yes.
Okay. And I guess to the owner of Crofters, it's here you grow again. I'm all for it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor.
Thank you.
Any further questions? We will come out of the public meeting to pass anything, correct? Oh, I keep going. Has the township received any correspondence with respect to this application?
No correspondence has been received.
And I don't see any further questions from council. I do want to, while you're on the phone, applaud Crofters for their continued growth. You're an important part of Seguin and an important employer. I often see Crofters jam in Walmart in Mexico, and that feels pretty good when I can say it comes from Seguin. So thank you, Crofters, for growing. And after the next item, we'll come out to talk about the decision affecting your property. So this is the purpose of consent application number B, 2020-0014-F for Coulter, is to create one 3.2 hectare lot with 332 meters of frontage on Osler Park Drive. The retained lands would have a lot area of 10.8 hectares with 462 meters of frontage on McGowan Lake. The proposed retained lot would be accessed via Osler Park Drive through a proposed right-of-way over the severed lot. The purpose of consent application B 2020-0015-F for Coulter is to provide right-of-way access over the proposed severed lot, benefiting the proposed retained lot from consent application number B 2020-0014-F. I now ask the clerk to state the method by which notice of the meeting was provided and the dates on which that notice was provided.
Notice of the public meeting was provided by posting the property and by regular mail on July 21st, 2020. Notice was therefore considered to provide in accordance with the requirements of the Planning Act.
Has anyone registered to speak in favor of or in opposition to these applications?
No one has registered to speak to these applications.
Has the township received any correspondence with respect to these applications?
No correspondence has been received.
Does council have any questions? Councillor Osborne.
Thank you. Question for Steve Stone. Steve, is this severance, is it going to be for commercial or residential?
Well, the lot is being created right between the commercial and residential. So both of them, in terms of the residential, it's an existing house, so that won't change. And the commercial area was zoned last year by council.
Okay, and is there any impact considerations on McGowan Lake in terms of capacity?
No, it is recreational carrying capacity is exceeded, but it's not increasing any because the dwelling's already counted in RCC.
Good, thank you.
Okay, there being no further questions, the council will now close the public meeting and move on. So I have a resolution that the public meeting held for the following matter is hereby closed and the regular meeting is hereby reconvened. Could I have a motion from Councillor Finson?
I so move.
Okay, and a seconder from Councillor Fellner?
Yes, seconded.
All in favor of moving out of the public meeting? Thank you.
Aye.
Okay, so this is the resolution that bylaw number 2020-069, being a bylaw to amend Township of Seguin zoning bylaw number 2006-125, property roll number 4903-030-011-00108, application number R 2020-0008-F for White at 472 Osler Park Drive is hereby deemed to have been read a first, second, and third time and passed by council. Could I have a motion from Councillor Collins?
I so move, Mayor.
Thank you. And seconded by Councillor Osborne.
Second, Mayor.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. That's carried. So crofters, please go ahead and grow. Thank you for attending.
Thank you
the
very
meeting.
much. Thank you so much for doing this again and for the support of Seguin.
Well, thank you. I'll look forward to working with you.
Thank you. Good night, everybody. Have a good night.
Good night.
Good night, Eric.
Thank you, John. Okay. Bye.
Okay, so we are going back to staff report number E on page 99. And I'll put the motion that the Council of the Corporation of the Township of Seguin does hereby direct staff to prepare a best practices policy for dealing with older open building permits and building construction without building permits in consultation with the Township of Seguin solicitor and insurance provider. Could I have a motion to put this on the floor from Councillor Fellner?
Yes,
Thank you. And a seconder from Councillor Moffat?
I'll second that.
Okay. Steve, could I ask you to speak to it and then we'll open it up for questions?
Sure. Thank you, Madam Mayor, to the rest of the council. This is an action item stemming from a closed session meeting or two ago. And in essence, council asked to have an idea of how many open permits we actually have in the municipality. So the building staff did take a look at land manager and came up with a chart for council's perusal. That's appended to the report. In summary, there's about 6,800 permits that are open, and that's going back many, many years. And also what we've done is provided just a discussion on the issue of statute of limitations, if you want to call that, or as I've correctly identified it in the report, is the what is it called? The Limitations Act.
Limitation periods.
Yes. So in essence, the limitations period is really about lawsuits against the municipality for negligence. And there's a number of time frames dealing with when negligence is first considered by the sewer, and then it can be as long as 15 years. So there really isn't a limitations period for old permits that are just open and not closed. And as a result, it's really a work in progress with landowners, and staff is suggesting that we work together with council to come up with best practices for the municipality as we attempt to close these permits.
Are there any questions for Director Stone? Councillor Osborne.
I think part of this conversation was brought up, Steve, because of a particular case up in Ted's ward.
That's correct.
The statute of limitations and how far you can go back and ask for building permits or whatever. Are we any closer to a recommendation on how far back we should be grandfathering buildings that existed 30 years ago? Like, are we any closer to a recommendation for that?
Well, that's why we're sort of suggesting that we develop best practices. The truth is that all building activity is governed by the building code, and right. It so happens that you built a structure 20 years ago and didn't have a permit. Technically, you have a building that it may or may not be up to code, and if somebody's in it, we as a municipality need to be proactive in ensuring that, say it's occupied, it is safe. So
I understand that. So you're saying to me, I read through that legal case. It was a difficult read, to say the least. But
for sure.
You summarized by saying the above being said, staff will continue to research this matter. So you got to do more before you can come back with a recommendation to council as to what statute of limitations we should apply?
Well, I think the additional research is really this change just came upon the building code a couple of years ago, and we haven't started to see the actual lawsuits travel through the court system. And as we get more case law, then you'll find that we may have to develop a more proactive stance with regards to limitations where we think we might be at fault at things.
So we're at the mercy still of the Ontario Building Code. We can't do a unilateral declaration of statute within the township. No.
Oh no, it's because it's Ontario statute. Yes, we're at their.
Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Fellner.
Thank you, Mayor. Steve, what have some of the other municipalities done? Have you done any research on how they've dealt with this problem? Because it's not going to be a problem that's just typically a Seguin problem. It'll be a pretty widespread problem, I would think.
No, I think as it relates to this report with the Limitations Act, what we would normally do is do research with the Ontario Building Commission and also with our insurance provider, just to make sure that we do everything we can to avoid risk of negligent lawsuits. When it comes to open building permits, what you see with our maintenance fee, for example, is something that was elsewhere in the province where municipalities are actually looking at and have passed bylaws to have a maintenance fee. And depending on how much that maintenance fee, they get differing measures of results with regards to closure. And it's as you can imagine, as the fees go higher, you might get more traction on that. But ours, as you know, only goes back as far as 2017, and it's really prior to that is do good on behalf of the property owner working with our building staff.
Okay, Councillor Collins.
Thank you, Mayor. Steve, I'm really having a hard time understanding your limitations period. The example that you picked to bring to council, it's urban to begin with, and it's relating to a condominium association. And you and I know there's no condominiums in Seguin. We're a rural municipality, and I think the biggest building other than commercial we don't even have a triplex. So I'm wondering, why would you pick that specific example to bring to council when it doesn't even relate to anything in our municipality?
Well, first of all, the township does have condominiums. The largest condominium that we have in Seguin is actually Rocky Crest. So secondly, it was in reference to where the similarities are, was in reference to the limitation period of 15 years. That applies to any sort of negligent act of the municipality, whether it's a condominium building, as this example is, or something like an accessory building that collapses and we fail to undertake the proper inspections on that. So that's all why I brought this back, because again, it was an action item coming out of closed. This, to be fair, because it's only been in existence for the last couple of years, there's very little in terms of case law as it relates to the 15-year period. There's other limitations that apply to negligence on the part of the municipalities. There's a 2 and a 5 year as well. So the reason why this was brought forward is it's the only readily available case law that we were able to find on the web.
So in other words, Steve, this is just commercial. This is just commercial. This has nothing to do with residential properties, correct?
No, the actual 15-year limitation period would actually apply to residential as well. Fortunately for this municipality, we don't have too many lawsuits on a case-by-case, year-by-year basis. And so we've never had to go to court and fight over limitation periods. But again, given that it was an action item coming out of close, we brought this forward for clarification purposes.
So, for example, in Seguin, then what date is our benchmark date? If we're looking at a 15-year limitation, what would be our benchmark date going back?
Well, if you were to apply this legislation, 15 years, let's say we issued a building permit in 2020, you would have the limitation period on negligence would go as far out as 2035. If you were looking retroactively, so you subtract 15 years, it would be 2005. But again, we don't have these types of lawsuits coming forward.
Okay, Councillor Osborne. Councillor Osborne.
There we go. Okay. Steve, you mentioned that there isn't enough case law yet. I guess
right.
First question is, how much case law do we need? And how far in the future do you feel we could come back to this based on case law, the way it moves?
Well, in regard to the 15-year limitation, this particular aspect of the Limitations Act, again, as you can see, there's very few. There actually is very few cases that deal with a lawsuit for negligence that was that far back. Most of the negligence cases occur within 2 to 5 years.
Correct.
So there's lots of case law in regards to that because of the lawsuits, and that's where we find ourselves. We have several cases that are ongoing now with regards to those types of cases. We don't have any 15-year one. And I guess when we had initially, when this came out, as I said, a year or two ago, we did try to pursue it with our solicitor, and his advice at the time was it's really too soon to come up with any sort of proactive measures, just because we need to see how the courts are going to play out on this 15-year period. And so if you were asking me to ballpark a figure, I said, yes, let's revisit it a year from now.
Thank you.
Councillor Moffat, you have your hand up, and I'd like to remind everybody that all this is asking for is council direction to have our planning people prepare a best practices policy. And all we're doing is saying, yeah, please go ahead and do the research and come back to us. Councillor Moffat.
You good?
Thank you, Mayor. You just answered my question.
Okay. Councillor Collins, you have your hand up again? Okay, Councillor Finson, do you have any questions?
No, thank you.
Okay, so all in favor of directing our staff to come up with a best practices policy?
Aye.
No case law.
Yeah. Councillor Fellner and Councillor Collins, are you going to vote? Councillor Osborne?
Question, how can we direct staff to continue to come up with a policy when there's no case law to base the policy on? That's a crazy direction in my concern, and in my books.
Well, I think we're asking them to do the best they can.
We already did, and he's done the best he can. He's got some cases and has told us that there's no other cases at the moment. So how can we ask for staff to provide a policy without facts? That's a silly request, I think.
Okay, we have a motion on the floor. I'll call for the vote again with a show of hands to direct staff to do it. Could I see those in favor of directing staff to prepare a best practices policy for dealing with older permits? Okay, Councillor Moffat. Councillor Finson, how do you vote?
Yes.
Okay. And I will vote yes, all against asking them to do this.
Against? Yes.
Councillor Osborne, okay, so we have a 3-3 tie. So it is defeated, so you have no work to do, Steve.
There you go, Steve, you've done your job.
Okay, Steve, I'm gonna keep you on there. We have, the report on Clapperton. Do you want to explain? I think didn't we do F, the open building?
The limitation period.
Okay, so, open building permit process is also there, so it's F. And again, I think it's very self-explanatory. Does anybody have any questions of Director Stone? Sorry. No questions?
Yeah, I do.
Councillor Fellner, okay.
Okay, so Steve, so 6,700 open building permits, a little unmanageable, is it not?
It is a big number, and of being able to manage it, I would say yes, it's manageable if say everybody and their monkey's uncle wanted to come in and get their permits closed tomorrow. Yes, it would be very difficult to manage. But what we're finding is that as especially the older permits, as people become aware of them, they're asking to work through staff to close them. And in terms of being proactive, we also find in our lighter months, sort of later in the fall, earlier in the spring, staff do actively try to close permits out through engagement with property owners. And also too, what they find that they can manage is closing permits that they know are open if it's an adjacent property, and they can do a quick inspection. They do it that way. So from that perspective, yes, it's a very large number, but our efforts to close permits is manageable at this time, and we take advantage of the seasonal variations inspections to close permits.
So in your opinion, of this 6,778 or whatever it is, open permits, in your estimation, how many people do you think are actually aware that they have an open permit?
Well, that's so
like obviously you guys know who all 6,707.
Right. So we haven't actively gone out and sent emails or letters to all 6,800 people. What we're doing nowadays is anybody who has a permit dating back as far as 2017 will be getting letters on an annual basis. So as that number, should I say, as the years go on, the percentage of people who know they have open permits will actually be increasing because they'll be into a maintenance period for those permits. But as far as the ones that were from the 1990s, for example, normally how they become aware of that is if they call and they want to build an accessory building, the building staff will say, oh, by the way, we noticed that you have several open building permits. Do you want to try and get those covered off and closed at the same time? So it's sort of, whereas where needed, they're informed.
Councillor Moffat.
So just to follow up on Councillor Fellner's comment, would it not be reasonable to ask staff to send out letters to the 6,700 people, or 6,700 minus the ones from 2017, to inform them to be able to close them out?
Would it be reasonable? I would simply say that a letter writing campaign of that would be could be done. I mean, obviously, it's the cost of a postage stamp, right, to be sent to the property owners. So we could, again, would probably initiate that on our off season. So you know, after October, for example, through to March.
So Steve, could you tell me how many old permits prior to 2017 you've closed off in the last year? Would you have that?
Not readily available, but I can certainly bring that to you to, let's see.
I'm just trying to find out, you know, if you've closed out 2, you used to have 6,780, and now we have 6,778. So I'm just trying to get a sense how quickly those older ones are actually moving along from.
Certainly we can get a report to that effect out of land manager. We just haven't got that summarized in this report. But I certainly, what we can do is at our next quarterly report, we can bring that information forward to council.
Well, I don't know. I think as a councillor, I'd love to see this number become like 67, and we closed out. We're not talking these issues anymore, and I'm not sure that I don't know that we're being proactive enough to close them out. I recognize that there's, you know, the new ones become juicier and, you know, get them done and everything else. But I look at some of these permits back, you know, we've got 219, 239 back in the late 80s and early 90s are huge numbers that seem, you know, would be a challenge to try to clear them. And even one dating back to 1960.
Yeah. And ideally, it would be nice if the building code was changed to say anything after 2000 is kaput. You don't have to worry about it. But again, as I mentioned in the early report, we're subject to the statute, and part of our role as a municipality is to ensure all construction, whether it's 1960s or 2020, is safe. So
I believe that.
But I will endeavor to bring that number back to sort of give you a sense of how many older permits we're trying to close per year. And I know Chris Busby does track that. I just haven't included it in the report.
So Mayor, can as part of this, I think the onus is on us as council and staff to try to get these closed off. And because we seem to have this issue every quarter when Steve/Mark come forward with building permit activity, we always seem to be at this juncture where we're asking about old permits, and now we have, it appears to be the full landscape. And I'm just wondering if we should be looking at this as an initiative to try to get these substantially reduced in the next, you know, year in the off season, that we become proactive.
I think, I mean, I would agree with you. I think it is important to let building and planning do it in the off season. And I think as part of the action items coming out of tonight, we can ask Director Stone to bring that report forward. How many were they able to close last year? And perhaps a bit of a proactive way to go after the ones that the numbers, the big numbers in the 80s and 90s at least. I know I talked to some of our inspectors, and they said, it's really interesting on some of them, you can't even find who the person was, and some of them are dead. And when you go back to 1960. So I think there's a way for building and planning to come back to us with a recommendation of how to be proactive and when to do it, whether it's email or letter writing or something, to try and tackle some of this. The whole idea too of, what did you call it, a maintenance fee, Steve? Might have some interesting clout to get people to do it. We have 3 more questions from councillors, and then I'd like to move on. Councillor Osborne.
Thank you, Mayor. Steve, you did mention that it's manageable. Well, I'm not trying to take a shot at you here, but this is an accumulating number. This is like a wildfire from the 60s. So, like, what sort of a message does this send to our ratepayers if we got open permits from 40 years ago that we're not catching up on, obviously? And like, has the figure been at 10,000 at some point? Is this a better figure than it's been? Or, I would think that back in the turn of the century, it was maybe only a couple of thousand. It looks as though it's getting deeper and deeper, and they're just not being done. And we're sending the wrong message. If I were building and I had an open permit, I'd say, shit, I got 40 years to close this. There's no hurry. It just sends the wrong message. I think,
Well,
I don't think we can accept that number historically, pre-Seguin, and move on and, say, well, we'll try and pick it up every year. We'll catch a few more. I think we've got to have a concerted effort. And I agree with Daryl. We need some sort of tracking on, like, what happened in 19? How many did we get caught up on, and how many in 18? We need some sort of a track so the council can have a look at it at least. Thank you.
Councillor Collins.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. Steve, what's the date that Seguin amalgamated?
Sorry? 99.
In 99. All right, so I'm looking at 99, right? And I'm thinking to myself, all right, prior to Seguin amalgamation, what is your reason we should be concerned? What's your reason for going after? Because what I'm afraid of, and I'll tell you exactly what I'm afraid of, is that what if these properties have changed hands in the interim and the present owner doesn't have a clue?
Well, that is
before, and it was before we even had our official plan in place, and during, let's say, the time period of between 96 and 99.
Right. So
I'm really having difficulty with that, because
Sure.
there should be some sort of grandfather clause, I would think.
Well, certainly there's, you asked, the first question is, why are we concerned? And I mentioned that earlier in the discussion. Is the issue really is we have a mandate as a municipality to ensure building activity is safe for all, including the current owner or the previous owner who has sold to the new landowner. So if we have issued a building permit, and we've assumed many from the older municipalities, and those permits, there's an expectation, if they're still open, that we're still responsible for ensuring that construction meets the code, that it won't collapse, for example, and harm somebody. So that's the reason for keeping permits open. In terms of your statement about a grandfathering clause, sometimes when we get into an old building permit, it doesn't match the current zoning bylaw. So the bylaw that was approved in 2006. So what we do is we don't treat them with the sort of same view as a new structure under the zoning bylaw. What we treat them as non-complying, and what we try to do then is just ensure they're code compliant. They're not zoning bylaw compliant. And so that's how we look at older buildings. So the ones that you referenced prior to amalgamation, because back then there was 4 different zoning bylaws. And then we sort of say, okay, we appreciate that you had a structure that was built without a permit, just complied with the code requirements to make sure it's structurally sound. And again, the reason for that is to ensure every building is safe to be occupied.
Right now, we don't know.
Counselor
Yeah.
Felder.
It's a slippery slope, to say the least, going forward with this. As you know, I'm sometimes thinking to myself, okay, is this a municipal cash grab moving forward into this abyss? It just simply, to me, does not make any sense why we should even consider going past or going later than when Seguin was amalgamated and going into what they did in Orville or Christie, or what they did in Rosso, and what they did in Foley back in the day. This just doesn't make any sense to me. Thank you.
Counselor Felder.
So, Steve, these older ones, like, let's just, use the date 1999, I guess, as first of all, I hope that you have a decent cross-referencing system between your open permits and your demolition permits, right? Because, there's a lot of stuff being torn down.
Right.
That was built, a lot more recent than that, right? And replaced. So, but, take the, 99 back, right? I mean, how many are open from 99 back? I mean, I can't tell off the chart. But, what I guess my question is what discretion does the building department have in order to grant these things closed? Because, like something that was built in 1990 is 30 years old. I mean, there's degradation in the building, right? That could rot in it, perhaps, that, wasn't there when it was built, right? So, I mean, that type of thing. So, I mean, how do you what kind of discretion do we have to do, as a building department under the act?
Yeah, there is discretion. Certainly the chief building official has the responsibility and the authority to look at some of these old construction permits and to say, as you pointed out correctly, a structure that was built, applied for in 74, it may still be open. And when a new permit comes along for construction and replace it in 2020, then they would go back and just say, yes, that 74 permit is no longer valid because we now have a new permit for a new structure. So there is that type of discretion that happens on a regular basis. Other parts of the discretion is, as I said, they may be, and we have this, a lot of permits are open for docks, and they may be out on a neighboring property and say, oh, that dock from 1990 was never finalized, and they do a quick inspection from the neighboring property, say, yep, the dock's there now. Looks like it's construction in accordance with the building permit and closed that way. So there is those types of things that they use from a discretionary perspective. As I said, some of the other things is more of a proactive, where we do try to work with people. I mentioned in the report about property sales. It's happening less now, but there are opportunities through the sale of land to introduce the new owner at that time to say, there's permits are still open. You'll have to close them, and sometimes both the existing property owner and future purchaser work to get those closed before the sale's done. So that, again, that's another aspect of discretionary action on the building staff here.
Yeah, because it just seems to me that building has been up 30 years and has been issue free and probably was built properly, and we don't have a lot of concerned about.
Yeah.
You know,
And another
I
thing
don't know. It makes a lot of sense. It's money to pursue something that's a statistic.
Okay, Councillor
Yeah, I'm
Collins?
afraid that that part of it doesn't make sense to me, so. Okay, thank you.
Collins, do you have your hand up again?
No, I was just listening to the
Okay.
final explanation from
Okay.
Steve.
Steve, I think you've heard loud and clear that we'd like some kind of a push or an effort or a recommendation to come forward for how you're gonna get this number down, and whether it's the really old ones or the recent ones, you know, and come back to us with how you best want to tackle it in your off season.
Sure.
Okay?
And still up,
Okay.
dead.
We move on to item 7G. And again, Steve, I'll ask you to speak to it. I think it's pretty self-explanatory. It's the Clapperton reapplication.
Yes, Madam Mayor, thank you to the rest of council. So this is going back, the public meeting was several meetings ago before council, where there was some concern about the size of the, if you want to call it, the extension of the boathouse. And staff has gone back to the Clappertons to ask them to look at options. And one of the options that we presented to them was to look at shoreline structures that would provide shade. And the Clappertons came back and said, because of the topography on their property, it's quite rocky and cliff-like in its appearance, they can't actually put shoreline structures for shade. So they feel that the most appropriate request is to have the extension on the boathouse that would increase the visual mass across the front. But the Clappertons hoped that with what they submitted is sufficient for council then to be satisfied that their request is not a huge request, and that we can be directed to prepare a report accordingly at the next council meeting.
Does anybody have any questions? Oh, Councillor Osborne.
Umbrellas work.
The, I do.
Hang on.
I do there. Okay.
Okay, Councillor Fellner?
I'm not quick with my hand. Not my blue hand, anyhow. So they reduce the upper level sun deck area, right?
Right.
How much do they reduce it?
Oh,
You probably said it in here somewhere, but I just can't see it.
Yeah, let me see.
It's on page. It just says it's been reduced. It's on page 130, the top paragraph.
Doesn't say how much.
But it doesn't say a percentage, no.
No, just it was reduced. So
Page 157 also talks about reduced size. Maybe that would help, Councillor Fellner.
157?
Yes.
I just wondered where it was at.
Yeah, so
and where it is.
Yeah, I would say that the red illustration shows some square footage moved off both ends.
Yeah.
So it's an area reduction. It's in terms of its visual presence. If you were looking at the front door of the boathouse, it hasn't been reduced in both house width, but the deck itself has been reduced by, I'm going to estimate about a quarter to all.
Okay. Oh, I see. Yeah. Okay. So they're just both ends. I'm sorry. Okay. But the reason why it's over width is because of this deck. Is that correct?
Right.
Okay. No more questions for me. Thank you.
Okay. And I don't see any other questions. So, Steve, I guess the next step is for you folks to come back with a report.
That is correct. For
okay.
Consideration.
That's great. Thank you. And now we move on again. Oh, do we have another one? This is the next one. Okay. And I know we have a site plan application, which is a little unusual coming to council. But do you want to explain what it is, Steve, and your recommendation to accept it?
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor, to the rest of council. So the Tates, as mentioned in the report, sought approval for a new cottage on their property, and the Committee of Adjustment approved that subject to two conditions. The first one is site plan control agreement for the re-landscaping of their property, and also for the pinning of the foundation of the new cottage. The council will be aware that the site over the last year was the subject of an enforcement action by Ministry of Natural Resources and Forestry and Seguin Township. And out of that enforcement action, a permit was issued for a rock retaining wall along the water's edge and a boat ramp. And that was on the MNRF. A permit was issued for that. And the enforcement action, staff was dealing with the Tates to come up with a revegetation plan for their first 20 meters of shoreline terrestrial environment. So what the council sees before that is the rendering by Breckenridge. We've dealt with them on several other enforcement, and they know our design guidelines and are very strategic with regards to the plans that are prepared. So as committee asked, I can refer matters to council. The ward councillor was actively involved in this one. He was interested, as well as some other members of council. So it's before you for your consideration. The recommendation is for, if you're satisfied with the landscaping plan, then to refer that for signature with the mayor and the clerk. Thank you.
I have a question from Councillor Moffat.
Thank you, Mayor. Steve, how many properties in the township have boat ramps?
I don't know that number. It's not many that I'm aware of.
Less than a handful?
Well, I can't say for certain.
Yeah.
And in this particular lake, there are no boat ramps, municipal or private.
So people have just sort of, driven their boat. It sounds just driven their boat into the lake without a particular ramp.
Yeah, I think historically, because this property was in a derelict manner, I think it was used as an opportunity to access the lake. So if you were to look at the neighboring property next door to the north, they have a similar gradual slope down. There are other properties on this lake that have a very sort of relief at the water's edge, and they can't launch a boat.
So just to go back, MNRF approved what?
They approved the installation at the high water mark of a boat ramp, and they also approved a retaining wall. And so those are considered what in the business is referred to as in-water works.
Okay, but it says here that we also are approving the boat ramp?
Yes, that's what they've asked for. And when I was talking with the landscape architect, I said, bear in mind, council would like to see it as natural as possible. You come up with a solution. So his solution was to cover the entire boat ramp area with soil and then vegetate it. So it will be in a green state.
Okay, so I'm just confused. If MNRF has approved the boat ramp, why are we approving the boat ramp?
Because the permit for M&R is at the water's edge and into the water. Why we're approving it is we don't allow for access on private property to the water's edge.
So we don't approve of boat ramps.
That's right. It's when you look at the exemptions, it says minor landscaping, and we wouldn't consider this minor landscaping.
Okay, thank you, Steve.
Councillor Fowler.
Yes, Steve, so if I remember this one correctly, a good portion of the new cottages is in that 20-meter area, correct?
Just 13, it's just shy of 14 meter setback. It's 13 and change.
Yeah, so the first 6 meters of the cottage is in the old shoreline allowance, right? So, and I'm looking at the landscape plan, and there isn't anything in front of that cottage that's going to be planted that's any higher than about 200 centimeters. Right?
Correct.
You know, which is, so, and it's sort of a very narrow lot, if I remember correctly. And
That's
the
correct.
cottage is right front and center, like there's nothing to screen. There's nothing in this plan that I see is going to sort of provide any screening from the lake to the cottage. Like, I mean, it shows this. It shows a few maple trees, some new red maple trees, which are lovely, and some white spruce trees, but it doesn't specify any height. And then, of course, then there's nothing in the area where the access to the lake would be for to launch a boat, right? So, I mean, I don't think that, in my mind, I mean, it's a lovely plan, but I'm not so sure that it's doing anything to really, provide any screening to the lake for the new cottages. The cottage is sort of right there, right? So, which tends to be an issue, does it not?
Well, when you think of what was there and what's on the properties next door, this will have more landscape material than the property to the north. With regards to landscaping, this what we try to do is screen up as best we can to allow for windows of opportunity to see from the cottage through to the lake. But over time, the idea is to have as much as 90% of the frontage as natural as possible and not being able to see the cottage.
Right.
Just a question. I see 3 new red maples and 3 large white spruce.
2 red.
Right.
3 white spruce, 3 new red maples.
Yeah.
And
There's
any of
actually
those trees will grow.
2 red
to
maple.
height. Three of each.
How what I'm looking at.
Well, there's actually another 2 red maples too over on the side.
Yeah, on the other side, yeah.
Yeah. So, but my point was, it doesn't really specify like how big a tree are these going to be. What are they going to put in? Are they put in few meter trees, or I mean, it doesn't really say, right?
It doesn't really say, but I do know from my own place that there's only a certain height that will take in new places. So my guess is there'll be 5 to 6 feet high at least to start.
Yeah, but it's not specified here. That's my concern.
That can certainly be added as part of the conditions of the site plan. So
I have a question from Councillor Collins.
Yes. Thank you, Mayor. Steve, this is in my ward.
right.
And I've been not involved with this particular property. But I do have to say, in this particular case, I do know a little bit about it, as you do, that the Tates, as I understand it, have developed their property to present with and without proper permits, as you have indicated. And I have decided not to go into the history why and why not they did, but to recommend they adhere to the present orders to move forward. I want to see the removal of the illegal boat launch as per the decision of the Committee of Adjustments. More larger trees, as Councillor Fellner has said, that there's no height. We're not looking at any heights. And I would like to see more, 6 to 12, 2 to 3 meters in height. rather than shrubs to restore the land back. And finally, before a building permit is issued, council approves the final site plan arrangement. Thank you.
Councillor Osborne.
Okay, Steve, what I see here is a bunch of nice landscaping around the building, lots of nice flowers and hydrangeas, and gonna make the cottage look lovely. Screening wise, it doesn't look like it does the job. I want to go back in history a little bit here. Apparently, bylaw was sent out spring of 2019 and observed illegal grading, changing of waterways, clear cutting of trees. Was this owner fined under our bill blasting tree cutting bylaw?
No, yeah, to get a fine, you have to take them to court, and they were not taken to court.
So why have the bylaw?
Sorry?
This guy obviously abused a number of bylaws, everything except blasting. Why have the bylaw if we're not going to enforce it?
Well, we are enforcing it. That's why we're here before council tonight.
Yeah. The point is, we have a bylaw. Is there set fines attached to that bylaw, Don?
No, there is not.
Oh, so it's without teeth. All right, because Ted may not have been involved with this, and it's not my ward, but I've had one of his neighbors calling me on a few occasions, complaining about the reckless behavior on this property. And I guess the first question is, who has the final call on boat launches? The township, who owns the shore road, or M&R, who rarely shows up at any party?
So with regards to in-water works, M&R has permit authority. Anything that's terrestrial would be the township.
Well, in order to launch a boat on a boat launch, you have to go over terra firma to get to M&R water, correct?
That's what I said, yes.
So therefore, if we don't allow the boat launch to go over the firm land, that would negate the permit they got from M&R, correct?
No, it simply would mean they can't use their lawn area as a boat ramp.
Right. Well, we had one on Turtle Lake where a boat ramp was constructed. The township came out and made him, and he went to great expense and trouble with a local contractor. Township came out and made him close the boat ramp, revegetate, put grass back, backfill where the cut was, and there was teeth. Why aren't we doing that in this case? I don't understand it. Are we reluctant to enforce our laws?
No, not at all. What we've done here is we've gone through the Committee of Adjustment channel, reviewed their development application. This is their request for the boat ramp to remain. Council, through its purview of approving the landscape plan through site plan control, can say, yes, we want that. This plan's not satisfactory. Come back to us with a more satisfactory plan. And if that's to have more specifics on trees, number of trees, height of trees, or
well, that's all fine and dandy. I want to go back to the original sin here, the grading and the clear cutting and the reckless behavior. And it just seems like this is being ignored in this case. So I guess it depends on who you are and where you live, because the guy on Turtle Lake, they threw the full force of the law and made him put it back the way it was historically. And this guy's getting passed, so I can't support this. Sorry.
Well, again,
site plan or not, it's just he hasn't followed the rules. We shouldn't be rewarding him. Sorry. Thank you.
I'd just like to point out that what we're looking at here is a site plan. And what I've heard Director Stone say is we can ask that the heights of trees be increased or at least explained. Now that I see that what's on the left-hand side, I see 8 new trees, 5 of which are deciduous, and 3 are the spruce. To me, those are trees, and although the boat ramp will be able to be driven on, it's all going to be green lawn. And I've been to this property, and most of the neighboring properties are also green with no trees in front of them. So I look at this site plan and I look at staff's recommendation that this complied with what Committee of Adjustments asked for. And I see no problem going back to the landscape architect and asking them to explain the size of the trees. But I know the size of this lot, and I wonder how many more trees will actually grow over 20 years in that small area. So I think that's where we need the landscape architect to tell us, if you put more than 8 more trees in there, what will their root system be in 10 or 15 years?
Gail?
Join the meeting.
Now I see a comment from Councillor Moffat and then Councillor Collins.
Well, I guess from what I hear and understand, I don't see us comparing to the neighboring properties. We're not talking about the neighboring properties. We're talking about this property, of which the individual built an illegal boat launch and clear-cutted area on the property, which is against our bylaws. So we should be evaluating whether the proposal is putting it back to what it is already. And
You're correct.
By the looks of it, I agree, we may have some trees, and I'm not a big fan of putting more green or grass because that means fertilizer and that means everything else going to the water.
Yeah, it's not grass recommending, it's white clover, which doesn't take any fertilizer.
That's grass.
Well, again, we don't have a policy to approve boat launches. We're asking now to approve a boat launch. And as Councillor Osborne has indicated, in the past, we have had an individual that created a boat launch and was required to return it back and remove the boat launch. So I don't see why we would be approving this site plan based on having a boat launch and the recommendation of the landscape. Thank you.
Just a question to Director Stone. If we don't approve this boat launch, how do people put their boats into Blackstone Lake?
Not our problem.
Well, I would imagine they'll find another access point.
They're doing it on their lawns now, I believe.
I'm not sure how they would access the lake.
Yeah, no, I've talked to some of the people, they basically all have them on their front lawns that they can. Councillor Collins, last comment.
Yes, yes, Mayor. I happen to agree with my colleagues that this is an illegal boat launch. And the decision was to remove it from the Committee of Adjustments. Councillor Fellner was at that meeting, and I have to go along that if we've done it in the past, why are we changing our minds now? This is something that we have to rectify now.
Okay, so I need to know.
Nothing moves ahead until that illegal boat launch is taken out.
Okay, I just like to know how do I and Steve and anybody else answer the questions for other people that are at boat launches throughout Blackstone Lake on their property? Do they all have to come out?
We're not talking about your properties.
Black water. First of all, it's black water.
Sorry, wrong lake.
Okay.
But how do we? But they've called. I've had some calls. So how do people put a boat in the lake?
They have neighbors, and there's lots there that is accessible to put their boats in the lake. Yeah. They've been doing it for 50 years.
So those are boat launches on other people's property?
Oh, no, they launch their own boat on their own property, or they have a friend that has a level land to go into the water. There's a cottage association there, Mayor, and there's never been a problem with launching a boat if you live on Blackwater Lake, period.
All right, I have a motion before us that bylaw number 2020-079 being a bylaw to authorize the execution of a site plan agreement between the Corporation of the Township of Seguin and Stephen and Kathy Tate, property roll number 4903-040-06812-000, application number F 2020-0003-C, is hereby deemed to have been read a first, second, and third time and passed by council. Could I have a motion from Darrell Moffat?
I so move.
Thank you. And could I have a seconder from Gail Finson?
I second.
Thank you. All in favor? Councillor Finson, how do you vote?
I vote nay.
Okay, the motion is defeated.
Unanimous.
Just for direction for Director Stone, what I think you hear is that the boat ramp has to go out, has to be gone. I would like to hear from the landscape architect about how many trees can be there over 15 years with the roots if they become mature. Because I'm concerned if we keep putting too many trees in, they'll die later. And I need to know some way to answer the people who want to keep having their boat launches on their property that are not these people. So we need to work on that.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and rest of the council. So what we'll do is we'll go back to the Tates and their landscape architect, and we'll come up with a revised drawing.
Okay, we have a question from Councillor Moffat.
Mayor, I don't think the question or the issue is not, none of those other neighbors, and I could be wrong, Councillor Collins can correct me. I don't think anyone created a boat launch. I think the natural landscape allows them to put their boats in. I would say that the Tates have created something that didn't exist before, and that is the problem. So to answer the question, those that have it's just, they didn't change their land to create a boat launch. I'm okay, I don't have any facts, but that's what I would presume. So that would be the answer. The Tates have done something completely different. They've gone and created something that didn't exist because their land was not sufficient. So to me, the answer is just as simple as that. Like, I don't know why we have to create an answer that, has to fit into this. The facts are the facts. Thank you.
Yeah, I just need something because I've seen one that's concrete. I just need some help on how we end.
And I would say that would probably be a problem. But if we go back to our building department and ask about, history of building permits, we know that 1960 is still a good date. So.
Okay. All right, let's move on. And you're still on deck, Steve, with the updates on the official plan and short-term rentals.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. To rest of council, this report's just an update in terms of where we're at with the two projects. What's going to happen over the next couple of weeks? Will there be an open house that is scheduled for the morning of the 24th? The consultants prepared a slide presentation, and that will be presented in the first hour of the open house, and it's scheduled from 10 to 12. With regards to the short-term cottage rental project, there's every day we're getting 3 to 6 emails with regards to comments, and that's being assembled. The engagement on that particular file will end on Labor Day, and after that, we'll have a report to council. Thank you.
Councillor Osborne, you have a question?
So, yes, for Steve, please. Steve, is this being just publicized on our website, or how else are we putting this out? Any other means?
Yeah, so with regards to the official plan review, we have to advertise in the local paper. We do an email blast. We have Instagram, other social media platforms as well as our website. The consultant also has a host website that they've created, so people can get access to it through that as well.
Are all the lake associations being contacted directly?
They've been, there's been an email blast that we sent out to all the lake associations and other interested parties, telling them about both projects.
Thank you very much. Thanks.
Councillor Moffat.
Thank you, Mayor. I know, Steve, we spoke earlier today about costs with regards to the official plan review. Were you able to ascertain where we are? Okay.
Well, I will report on it on the 24th, that's for sure.
Okay, thank you very much.
Okay, any further questions? No. Councillor Finson, anything? No. Okay.
No, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, Steve, your draft siting and consultation protocol for towers and communications. And I know this is a biggie.
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. To the rest of council, I'm just trying to get that page in the report.
187.
187, that's correct. Thank you. So again, one of the directions from council earlier in the summer was to come up with a draft siting and engagement protocol that was homegrown in Seguin. And there was a number of examples that we presented to council at that time. And what we heard from a couple members was preference over the Island Trust example. So what we did is rather than reinvent the wheel, we sort of wordsmithed it to reflect Seguin's Township's needs. And in essence, what that does is it does a couple things. The protocol says to the telecommunication companies, be aware that here's where we would like to see the towers go, for example, on municipal property, in industrial areas, away from shoreline settlement areas in our villages. And then it also sort of outlines sort of a communication approach that they need to follow, steps sort of in the process to ensure that the public are adequately engaged and any sort of issues arising from that engagement are adequately addressed to the council's satisfaction. So this is my first cut, a draft, and really the recommendation is now let's have council and constituents take it to heart to see if they can improve upon it. So again, thank you very much.
Steve, one group that I would like to have take a look at this is our smart community. There's one individual, Bruce, who crafted many of the siting policies for some urban areas in his past life. So if you don't mind, I would like to direct him to this, to have some comments come from them as kind of our technical experts.
Certainly.
Okay. Councillor Fellner.
Thank you, Mayor. Steve, I'm just sort of thinking along the lines of, if we've got a master map of what towers are currently situated in the township and where they are.
So if you remember, council directed me to come up with a strategy. So as part of that exercise, Chris Mahan and I are doing just that. We're hoping to have a map of all locations. And with any luck, that would be before council next meeting.
Okay, because I'm wondering if you had, if you had such a map, then you might want to think about employing a strategy too that would specify what, within a certain footprint spacing.
Right.
Type of thing, there would only be allowed one to site, one.
For sure.
Sort of like the way they do oil wells, they're on 30 acre spacings or 50 acres, 60 acres. You're only allowed to have one tower within. So then, of course, the existing towers, of course, would start that governance off, right?
Right.
So just wondering if that might have some merit too. I'd be interested in seeing that for sure. Thanks.
Most definitely, that would form a very useful tool when you look at the siting and engagement protocol. So,
Councillor Osborne.
Thank you, Mayor. So Steve, I would think the first step is yourself and Chris establishing this review of existing tower sites, that map.
that is correct.
And you mentioned there that council can include a public consultation process. We would follow up that inventory with a public consultation. Is that your recommendation?
Well, in this particular protocol, as before, yes, we would engage the public, just as we're doing with the short-term cottage rentals, be along the same, and ask them for their input in regards to this protocol.
So this inventory.
The inventory is somewhat separate. That's to deal with the broadband strategy that council directed us to look into. But the two would actually dovetail nicely together, because if you have a protocol that says you want a different Councillor Fellner's comment about having them spatially separated, council may want to have what is called Tower Hill, if you all know that place, where there's lots of towers, but at least that's where they all are. So that's how that would dovetail nicely with our inventory as it relates to how we might approve or give consent to future towers.
Unfortunately, we don't have a big Tower Hill. However, so this public consultation would be an eye opener for our ratepayers to know exactly how many towers there are out there that they're unaware of.
That's
for one,
right.
Okay. Secondly, while we're on this subject of towers, I have some AGMs to attend, and I don't know about other councillors if they have any. But since our decision of the last meeting to go with the VNet proposal, I need to, and I think for the benefit of all council, we dealt with most of this in closed session. We came out with a resolution with our pick, and that was it. There was very little detail as to what that plan included. Therefore, I feel the public at large is still in the dark as to what our plan is with this VNet proposal. What my question, I guess, is, and for myself and other councillors interested, how much of our closed session information can be divulged at annual general meetings of lake associations, etc.? Because if you're asked the question, what's the plan and how did you get there? I'm sorry, I'm gagged as to how I got there. All I can say is, here's the plan. Any other people have concerns about being questioned about the details?
Councillor Osborne, there is a media release in the works right now with VNet, Smart, and Seguin that will lay out about as much information as we can talk about right now. But I also am in discussion with VNet, who will be putting together a public, I guess it's like a website, and they hope to have that up in 2 or 3 weeks, which will allow people to see what their plan and timetable is, and let people put their address in and see if they're going to be covered, those kinds of things. And public consultation by VNet is planned. And I did speak, I think I indicated this on the 28th, to Mayor Conoval, was very positive about the type of consultation that VNet conducted.
Well, that's not what I'm referring to, Ann. I think you're missing my point. My point is, we arrived at this.
We cannot divulge the technical aspects of the VNet proposal.
We arrived at a decision, and what VNet's going to put out is basically all the public will glean from that is the resolution when we come out and open finally.
That is not what's in the media release, Councillor Osborne. We are working with as much information.
So the media release is going to indicate what the process was and how we arrived at a decision. Is that what you're telling me? Even though it's closed information?
No, it's going to talk about who's going to be covered, how consultation's going to occur.
So we're okay.
Timeline.
I'm not going to get an answer to my question. I guess, albeit safe to say, is that all the public is going to know is what we're prepared to tell them they know, and what what our plan is to do it. They're not going to know anything about the process leading up to it. Am I correct?
I don't think that's true. I think the process, the CGen process was absolutely transparent and public.
No, the process, the council deliberations about this whole thing, the split vote, if you recall, 4-3, it was not unanimous. The council deliberations were all held in closed. All of the debate that we had and all of the discussions and the rationales and the reasoning is still enclosed. The public has a right to know how we arrive at decisions. That's my question.
I will see if the VNet lawyers will release any of the technical details that were in their proposal.
VNet doesn't run this township, Ann. Sorry. Thank you. That's all I have. I'm getting nowhere.
We received a confidential report from them, and it's our
fine.
responsibility to keep it confidential.
Fine. Thank you for no answer.
Steve, you're still on for item K.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, to the rest of the council. So this report is, again, a report for direction. One of the concerns that came to light in the last month or so was in relation to inquiries we had for a property that was up for sale that was zoned industrial, but it's very close to really nice shoreline property area and a resort. And if council is not aware of cannabis manufacturing and growing, if it's not controlled properly from a air emission standpoint, it can be quite stinky, is the best way to describe it. And so given that this industrial property is up for sale, we were a little concerned that our zoning bylaw is a bit too lax with regards to this specific industrial type activity. So what we're asking for is, does council want us to initiate a review of the permissiveness of the bylaw and see if we can tighten it up somewhat to limit cannabis manufacturing in close proximity to our residents.
Let's not get technical here. Jesus, Murph.
Thank you.
Does anybody have any questions for Director Stone?
Councilor Collins.
Councilor Collins.
I think that when the provincial government asked us about the possibility of cannabis in Seguin, I believe that we did pass a bylaw, did we not, Mayor?
I believe we chose to do nothing that would therefore allow cannabis retail. Correct me if I'm wrong, Director Stone. I don't think it talks about manufacturing.
No, that's correct.
Okay.
So we were only dealing with retail outlets at that time.
Okay. But we were agreeable to commercial outlets, correct?
To retail cannabis, yes. We said we'd allow them.
No, growing. I'm talking growing facilities.
I don't believe we addressed that when it came from the provincial government. They were only looking at retail stores. Director Stone, correct me if I'm wrong. I don't think we dealt with anything to do with manufacturing or grow up.
No, and historically we've looked at certainly when the type 1 facilities, which are the federally licensed ones for commercial grade cannabis, there was a couple opportunities 2 years ago where they were looking for a site either in Parry Sound District or Muskoka. That facility ended up in the Muskoka District, I believe, in Bridge.
Yeah.
This was the first time we've really had serious inquiries for a non-federal federal facility. It's not a closed facility as you might find in Bracebridge. So we just thought council should be aware of it, and that's why we've put the report together.
All right, good. Yeah. Thank you. Thanks, Steve.
Councilor Fellner. Oh, you're on mute, Counselor Fellner.
Okay, got all kinds of buttons. Okay, Steve, so I understand the concern about the emissions, but I mean, they can put the proper engineering controls in to manage emissions. I mean, there's, the scrubbers, there's all kinds of things that could be stipulated. Do we not have an air quality? We don't have an air quality.
No, that's
Anything in our, I mean, marijuana production isn't the only smelly industry out there, like.
That's correct. Air quality is a mandate of the Ministry of Environment, Conservation and Parks. So they would have various requirements. The tricky part of it is whether or not they consider, an indoor grow op to be a manufacturing facility, and whether or not they would be able to actually, have a C of A, certificate of approval or certificate of compliance with their standards. So this is to deal more with land use, strictly deal with land use, and where we would go with it would ultimately have a setback requirement, no different than what we have now for 300 meters or even greater from a residential area for type 3 industrial uses, for example. So.
Right, okay.
Councillor Osborne.
Thank you, Mayor. So Steve, your conclusion is that we should receive the report for info.
That's right.
And encourage your staff to see whether or not our bylaw needs to be updated to deal with it.
That's right.
Can you give us information as to where this potential production facility is? Is that not public information?
It's down in the Hammer Bay Road area.
Okay. And is it currently more than 300?
No, well, I had to do
from our lakefronts and settlement.
Let me just do.
There's not a lot of settlement there on the backside.
No, it's not necessarily that. The bylaw would be applicable to all areas within the township. So,
regardless of distance from settlement or lakefront.
It would be location. So, say for example, if they were locating it out on 141, if they were within, say, I used the example of 300 meters. If they were within 300 meters, they wouldn't be allowed to have that facility there. So,
like for example, let's just pick a site. Brent Quarries on 141, which is right at Nipissing Road, right? Would that would be like a conducive site, in your opinion?
Well, it could be if they had the appropriate setback.
Yes.
Again, we're using. So just to take a bird's eye view of this, I'm going to click on the property and let's see.
I'm just wondering how we would zone that get involved with zoning when it's really more of a matter of proximity to habitation and lakefront as opposed to.
So the nearest cottage from the nearest cottage from that facility would be less than 140 meters. So there's several cottages on that lake.
But that's beyond the 300 meter level. Right?
So how it would work out is there'd be an exception within a new line within the provisions of the industrial area that would say cannabis manufacturing facilities must be at least 305 meters away from the nearest.
So we would set some standards in there, and then deal with it as it comes up.
That's right. And
all right, thank you.
Okay, I've got some hands up, and then I'd like to move on because I personally believe that we should ask staff to do something to float a bylaw. Councillor Collins.
Yes, just for everybody's information, I've been driving through the region where the largest cannabis commercial operations in Leamington exist right now, and I can't smell a thing. I cannot smell a thing. And I've been driving through there for the last couple of years where I'm building my boat right now. So there you go. The smell, the ventilation systems are superior. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Felder.
Yeah, I mean, I think that a couple of points here. One is that it's an existing manufacturing facility. I think the zoning is already correct. That's been empty for quite some time. So, I mean, it would behoove us to come up with a, a strategy to get a meaningful business into that building. I mean, it's just employment waiting to happen. That's just number one, whether it's a marijuana business, a manufacturing business, or some other business. I think that could be a focus for our economic development people. The second is I think before you just, go out and do a knee-jerk 300 meters from this, and there's quite a few cottages down and behind that building on Hamer Lake, and I would hate to see any business go in there that's going to cause, a disruption to residential life. But I mean, I think you really got to look at the science. That to Ted's point, the science that is employed in order for them to get a permit to even manufacture. I'm sure that it isn't just an open court. I mean, I'm sure there's probably some pretty rigid standards as far as air quality emissions out of marijuana manufacturing facilities. So, I think Ann's right too. I think, or the mayor's right too. I think you should go and prepare a report and bring it back. But just a couple observations to consider. Thank you.
Councillor Moffat.
Steve, would this be a change then in our official plan, this zoning bylaw adjustment?
No, because the property would be a zoning regulation.
Okay, because obviously we've chatted about housekeeping matters and, items that were out in the public on the official plan and get some input. So no, I'm not in disagreement with anything that other councillors have said. So thank you.
Okay, Steve, so take a look at the zoning bylaw. I like Councillor Fellner, believe that it needs to be an employment opportunity, and I know how many people are employed in the Muskoka grow-up, and it's very, very significant employment. And generally, very technically highly paid people are working in that facility. So we need jobs, but I think we need to take a look at our zoning bylaws and figure out where Environment Canada comes in with technology and who does what. So by all means, go and look at it and bring it back.
Okay. Thank you, Council.
Thank you. Okay, we are moving to business. And I think, once again, these reports are pretty comprehensive. Councillor Moffat, I'll ask you to talk about Gypsy Moss, although I've already had some compliments about what's on our website.
Yes, and I would like to say that when I started this discussion, I don't think we had anything, and I worked with both Michelle and JJ in the last 2 weeks or thereabouts, gathered a series of information. I know JJ went off and grabbed some information, and it's on the website, which is great. And I've got also some compliments from individuals with the amount of information. So there's nothing more to be done at this point. So I think I've just supplemented JJ. I know she's away this week, and just touch base with her to see if there's something else to add in the future. But as of right now, it's a matter of education and information. And as Councillor Osborne would say, Mother Nature is Mother Nature. We can help or hinder, and it's really, you can make the choice as to what you want to do.
Don't spray.
That's all I have to say.
I also do think it's quite localized within Seguin. There are some people reporting bad outbreaks, and there's others saying, haven't seen anything like we did a few years ago. So I think it's important to have the information out there.
Yeah. I've noticed it more actually on the trees in Perry Sound when I've been in Perry Sound. The female moths, you know, versus in Seguin, I've seen more of the males flighting about. And as I found out last week, some people just do it for aesthetic reasons. You know, they may be planning a wedding and next year they realize that they've got to, you know, fix the area to prevent the moths, you know, ruining the ceremony or something. So, thanks.
Okay, thanks for bringing it to our attention. And this issue of the rocks on North Sandy Plains Road, yeah, I was going to say, Councillor Coppage, can you address this one?
It's a no, it's not a big problem. Excuse me. We're basically just going to move the rocks over to allow 8 to 9 foot clearing in there. And we've also discussed we would put some beaver tail or some warning markers on the rocks or where the rocks are placed so that somebody doesn't hit them. But we don't have any issue with it. The problem was putting in big docks and as putting in big boats in an area that's very, very shallow. So.
Okay.
That's.
Thank you for handling it.
Mayor?
Whitestone is going forward with the same resolution that we passed.
Hands up.
Councillor Osborne, you have a question for Director?
Yes,
Coppage?
for Director Cobbage. Peter, I had a call a few days ago from Walter Sembe, and he said, like, what's happening? And I said, well, didn't the Director of Public Works get back to you? Because he thinks your solution's a great one, but have we not communicated to him directly as the kind of the chair of that little committee?
I just got back from holidays. It'll be taken care
Oh, you were away. Okay, that explains it. Because I explained to him what your plan was. He thought that was great. And he said he offered, and I don't know if this is possible, people in the area have equipment. They said, we can move that rock away in the winter for you and put it back in the spring, rather than have the township spend time and money coming out and moving that one rock. The offer's on the table. You can discuss that with Walter.
We'll give him a call tomorrow. I came back today.
Yeah.
Tom and I saw the questionnaire or the petition. We had a discussion about it. We'll give him a call tomorrow.
Is it possible for them to be tasked with moving that rock seasonally, or would you rather have the township do it?
No, I don't see a problem with them doing it. It's under the guidance of the township. I mean, they would do it anyway, really. If they have township approval, then we're working.
They're prepared to do it as you instruct. Save us going out.
That makes a lot of sense.
Thank you.
Okay. Item C is just a copy of the same resolution that we passed in principle. Whitestone's taking it forward, I believe, tomorrow. The Town of Perry Sound Resolution, Municipal Financing Assistance Program, it's there for your information. And similarly, the Township of the Archipelago resolution on the West Perry Sound Health Center funding, it's the same thing we've discussed at many times, that the I'm on F, or E and F. Or do they want us to do one too? Okay. So this is the Archipelago one, about the health center, that recognizing that our health center funding is based on our permanent residents only. So they are asking that we have a motion that the Council of the Corporation of the Township of Seguin does hereby support the Township of Archipelago Council's Resolution 20-098, copy attached to Schedule A, requesting that the province provides funding to the West Perry Sound Health Center that recognizes the real residential population of West Perry Sound, its tax base, and the large catchment area. And that a copy of this resolution be sent to the Honourable Christine Elliott, Deputy Premier and Minister of Health, the Honourable Steve Clark, Minister of Municipal Affairs and Housing, Norm Miller, MPP, Perry Sound, Muskoka, the West Perry Sound Health Center Board of Directors and Administration, and all of the West Perry Sound municipalities. Could I have a motion from Councillor Osborne?
So moved.
Can I have a seconder from Councillor Fellner?
Yes, seconded.
All in favor of supporting the archipelago? Thank you. Councillor
Aye.
Carried. Yeah. Okay, and Zuder is asking for a letter of support for their ICON application. You may recall that this funding envelope has been opened by the province. It closes on August 21st. Many of the ISP, you have to be an ISP to apply for it, because you have to have 3 years of experience of running it. So many of the ISPs are coming to many of the municipalities asking for a letter of support. In discussion with some of the other mayors, people are just saying, sure, I'll support it, and we'll see who gets the funding. With your agreement, I will sign a letter of support for Zuder, like I have for other ISPs. Councillor Moffat?
Is Zuder an ISP, or I was confused by the correspondence, exactly what,
They were going back almost 18 or 20 years. They were the first to provide coax and DSL to some of our cottage
okay,
people using the copper phone lines. I think they've upgraded a little, but they're a low-end, local, very local ISP.
okay. All right, thank you.
Okay. We have,
Oh, I think Councillor Fellner had his hand up.
sorry, Councillor Felder. Yep.
Unmute. Okay, thanks. Oh, Madam Mayor, I just had a question here in his letter. It says that previously, he said that his tower is still there and is available for use, but it doesn't sound like he's using it now. And that he had connected his tower to Tower Hill in Perry Sound. So is that what he's?
It sounds like he wants to change. It sounds like he wants to change his plan, but what he wants is our support for his funding application.
Yeah, no, that's fine. I just kind of wondering so he's just a one tower guy over there. Okay, perfect.
Yeah, and he used the old phone lines in the past, but that technology's kind of gone by the board.
That was
Yeah, no, I recognize the name. It's been around for a while.
Yeah, he was our first internet provider, that's for sure. Okay. Okay, here we have a bylaw, that bylaw number 2020-076, being a bylaw to amend bylaw number 2020-058, being a bylaw prescribing times for setting fires, precautions to be observed, and penalties for contraventions, is hereby deemed to have been read a first, second, and third time by council. Could I have a motion from Councillor Collins?
Yes, I so move.
And seconded by Councillor Moffat?
I'll second that.
And Dawn, would you like to speak to this?
There was an error on the first bylaw where we referenced 1.1.3, and it should have been 1.1.1.3. So we were basically adding a 1 and changing the bylaw number.
Okay, thank you. All in favor of passing this?
Question?
Oh, Councillor Osborne, I'm sorry. Okay.
Does this new bylaw include fireworks, Don?
Yeah, the only thing we're changing, Rod, is where it references 1.1.3, now references 1.1.3. The bylaw itself isn't changing.
Okay, and is there a fine schedule?
Yeah, as per the first bylaw.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
All in favor of making the correction?
Yay.
Thank you, and that's carried. You have the CAO's report in writing, and in her absence, I think it speaks for itself. If people have questions on it, I suggest you send her an email and wait patiently for a reply. Council reports. Let's go to you, Councillor Moffat.
Okay, let's see. Museum on Tower Hill, West Perry Sound District. Number of meetings with respect to finances, and just a general board meeting we've had. Ice cap discussions and meetings we've been working with. I missed the communication meeting last week as a result of our council meeting going over on the 28th. But the ice cap group got together with a much larger communication, trying to pick up the COVID-19 team to try to get ice cap and the carbon calculator, a big push on that. So JJ was instrumental in those discussions in terms of putting some basic stuff forward for the committee to review and consider, and was accepted, as well as putting a strategy out similar to what she's experienced with COVID-19. And that also led to, consistency of message, timing of message, and everything else on the carbon calculator. So I did speak to JJ and Michelle about that. Sent her email with regards to their work on that. As I mentioned earlier today, we had a meeting with the Perry Sound Area Active Transportation Committee. And I think what I get out of David's discussions earlier, I think there's an opportunity for the Perry Sound Area Active Transportation to try to get the band back together and see if we can talk about trails and such in the area. And I've been approached about a potential new trail through Ward 1 that I've touched base with Michelle. I just need to get her agreement to be able to speak to Chris Mahan to get a little bit of help to try to cite a trail before coming back to council to, just give them a heads up and report a little bit more. So, but I think it'd be good to get that band back together to talk about trails overall, given David's positive comments, and probably word of mouth. We need to do a little bit more, in terms of the Rose Point Trail. But I think, as Councillor Fellner would agree, the Rose Point Trail is more than an ATV trail, and the trails are more than just ATVs. And I think there's an opportunity to, when you look back at the Seguin Trail, it was more to do with horseback riding, hiking, riding your bike, and those types of things. And it's obviously deviated, and added in ATVing and snowmobiling was in there at the beginning, but I think there's an opportunity to revisit those things. So that's lots of calls from residents. As Steve mentioned, short-term cottage rental is a hot topic. A number of calls and emails and such, and some on the OP review as well. And I guess, I think that's probably it for the last 2 weeks. Thanks.
Thank you. We'll skip over to Councillor Osborne.
Thank you, Mayor. Just wanted to make a mention on the CAO's report, or second last item, about mandatory masks in all township indoor public spaces effective July 24th. Is the mask mandatory in the township office now by all staff?
Unless you're in your own personal space, yes.
There wasn't a few weeks ago. Okay, thank you. That's good to know. Secondly, I have a annual general meeting, August 20th, Clear Lake. I've been in discussion with CPAC about our emails that were generated to Seguin Township all through, the last few years. For some reason, we were dropped off the email list, info at Seguin. Donna wasn't receiving them. That's been corrected. Heard from Jeremy, who said that he's put us back on that list. And as far as the reorganization of the CPAC committees, that's still in flux at the province. Province hasn't determined which way they're going on that. There was discussion about DSABs being involved. I don't think it's going that route, but that's to be announced. Other than that, nothing to report.
Councillor Felder.
Yeah, I was sitting here thinking, geez, I haven't done much lately, but I did attend my first park-to-park board meeting since the last meeting, I believe. Was that long? Yes. Anyhow, it was a very interesting meeting. I could go great length, but basically what came out of it is I think that we'll see a letter from Park to Park asking if we could help them with their governance issues. I sort of emphasizes that, it really needs to get their house in order. And I think, there was some discussions about, funding and that type of thing, which I pretty non-committal on. It seems to me that, parts of that trail are in really, really poor shape, particularly the part from the Seguin Plaza up to the Rankin Lake Road is terrible. It's not really much good for anything the way it is. So I think there's a lot of work to do here, and I'm not really sure exactly what the best way to approach it is. I've had some discussions with people that have been involved with the association for quite a while. I do know that the bridges are in bad shape, some of them, and need repairs. It's maybe something we could look at. I think we've got, especially the bridges in Seguin, we should ensure that they're kept in good shape. So I think I have another meeting in September, but in the meantime, I think we should get a letter. I told them to ask them to address it to mayor and council, clerk, CAO. I as well have gotten some calls on some short-term rental problems. There seems to be a hot one up in the north end of Lake Joe. Another one that's maybe not so hot, but is certainly evident elsewhere in the ward. And I also got a call about somebody putting an illegal dock on Taggart Lake. I thought it was on our property, but I guess it's actually on I forget the guy's name. Curtis's property, but it seems like they're accessing through this dock through our road allowance. So I apprised Mr. Stone about both of them and advise the residents to contact him directly for next steps. I think that's about it for me.
Councillor Collins.
Yes, Mayor, thank you. Basically, I've just been dealing with our seasonal residents and with their concerns, obviously. But the two main issues that I think are that have come to light is, number one, the flags at our fire hall are deteriorated and they need to be replaced. And there seems to be a lot of concern with our cemetery in Orville, the fencing out front. It's basically a green snow fence. And they're wondering why it's, basically a cheap green snow fence at the front of the front entrance to our cemetery. So I'm thinking that maybe down the road when the cemetery committee gets together, that they should maybe look at or find out if they can build a better fence at the front for just aesthetic reasons. This is Seguin, and I think we come up with a better solution than the green snow fence at our cemetery. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Vincent, do you have anything to comment on?
I will just say that I met with the Integrity Commissioner. We had a lot of trouble getting together. Ended up on the phone, so we did get our meeting done with, and it was very good. I would just like to say to Councillor Collins that I will check into that for you tomorrow with about the snow fence. Was it Christie or Foley?
Oh, sorry. No, it was in Orville.
Okay. I will ask about that for you. Also, as Councillor Collins was saying, I'm sorry, I'm not feeling well, so I'm having trouble thinking. I've had a lot of complaints from cottagers to do with fireworks down at the docks in Rosso, to do with sports cars doing donuts down there, to do with just fireworks after 11 down there. So dealing with some of those, working with Don Hood, and hopefully we'll resolve those issues. Other than that, I've had no meetings, just here talking to people when they need me. Thank you.
Thanks, Gail. Just to give you a brief report, since the last meeting, I attended the Roberts Lake meeting that was to deal with planes landing on Roberts Lake. The Ministry of Transport has come and said in no uncertain terms that the airplanes have the right of way on this lake, and it's as a result of a Roberts Lake resident complaint, and so now there's a light at Roberts Lake alerting people when a plane will be taking or landing. And the people that attended the meeting, I think, were really, really positive about how the township had handled it and how the airport was handling it. July 23rd was the hospital radiothon that raised a record amount of money. On the 23rd, I also had a conference call with Susan Church, who's the chair of the Blue Sky organization, economic development organization north of us, and learned an awful lot about what they do and can do. July 24th, I attended the Muskoka Lakes Association annual general meeting. Then on July 29th, I had my meeting with Suzanne Craig, the new Integrity Commissioner, and I think she's going to be very strong. July 30th, members, Councillor Coles and I, with several members from the SMART community, listened to a presentation from ExploreNet about where they're trying to go from a broadband technology point of view in rural Canada. It's amazing. The ISPs are coming out of the woodwork as COVID shines a light on what we don't have here. And then August 1st was the Lake George North Association annual general meeting, which I attended as well. So the lake associations, many of them are trying to have their meetings via Zoom or teleconference, and most that are doing it are finding record attendance because people can attend from wherever they are. In Lake Joe, they had some people from Europe on the phone that would never have been at the meeting here. So, but they are property owners, so that was good. So now we have a motion that the Council of the Corporation of the Township of Seguin does hereby receive the board and committee agendas and minutes and the correspondence as presented on the agenda for the August 4th, 2020 meeting of Council. Could I have a motion from Councillor Fellner? Okay. Could I have a seconder from Councillor Moffat?
I'll second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. That's carried. I'm going to close. So now I've got a motion that the Council of the Corporation of the Township of Seguin does hereby proceed to a closed meeting at 7:40 p.m. in order to address matters pertaining to litigation or potential litigation, including matters before administrative tribunals affecting the municipality or local board. Zoning bylaw amendment application R 2019-0017-H, the Hebert appeal. Seguin Marina enforcement update, which is P01-2017-0006-H, and building related issues at 45 Sunset Cove. And personal matters about identifiable individuals, including municipal or local board employees, and these relate to the building-related issues at 45 Sunset Cove. Could I have a motion from Councillor Osborne?
So moved, Mayor, but could I request a 3-minute recess? It's been over 3 hours.
Okay, let's just get this motion.
Yep.
Okay, and then,
Yep.
Councillor Fellner, can I have a seconder?
Yes, second.
All in favor of moving into close?
Aye.
Okay, thank you, Gail.